Part 102. I'm Really Immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Ru Siahua. Chapter 1038. The night breeze carries the aroma of hot braised pork and fried dumplings on Posa Street, and blends with the lights and red wine in Jafang West Road Bar, creating a prosperous scene of fireworks in the world. Chinyanan followed Chinzasi for a busy day and didn't have time to change her clothes and shoes. She was dressed elegantly and fashionably. She looked like an elite working woman who would eat with her colleagues on Posa Street after get off work and then have a couple of drinks nearby. When Chinzasi and I were in the bar just now, there were a lot of people chatting with them, and we even encountered strange beasts that looked like humans, but they didn't come into contact with them. Chinzasi didn't want to alert the snake yet. The noisy environment is full of pollution, which is even worse than Zuhuntang's wisdom-driving aura. It is a place that is very unfriendly to pregnant women. Naturally, Chinyanan will not stay longer, disappointing all the men and women who are ready to move. Some people even followed Chinyanan out and gave up after seeing her getting into the public security department's car. I didn't expect that after I came to the Posa Street police station to check some files, I would see people eating under the parasol tree. Chinzasi saw his cousin who had just been in the bar with a cold face and kept away from strangers. He was like a bank manager meeting a demolition household with a lot of cash in his hand, and he greeted her with a cheerful face. "Ah, why are you eating here?" Chinyanan smiled and waved, greeting everyone, and then stood next to the Empress Dowager Xiaozhao, who was benevolent, duankang, diligent, thrifty, protective of the family, good at business, kind and loving, Shangxian. "Yaya, look, this is the meat sandwich Xiaoling made for me." Shang Guandandan raised the meat sandwich in his hand and showed it to Chinyanan, his face tilted to the side with an expression of pleasure and admiration. Shang Guandandan just noticed that when Chinyanan greeted everyone, his eyes paused for a moment on everyone's face. To be precise, there was a pause on the faces of Shang Guandandan and Lu Chang'an, while there was only a pause of 0.8 seconds on Zhou Shuling's face. This subtle difference was discovered by the Queen Mother, who was skilled in palace fighting. As a Queen Mother who is able to control palace battles with ease and use the resources in her hands and the right to allocate sleeping rooms to control these daughters-in-law, of course she cannot let Chinyanan, who has just received some nutritional resources, be arrogant. She must know that Shang Guandandan is still like Zhou Shuling very much. This will be conducive to the stability and peace of the harem, allowing the daughters-in-law to compete, and there should not be too obvious status gaps, creating a situation where all parties can rely on each other but not feel confident. Sister Zhou is very clever. She can make some gadgets using local materials to make Dandan happy. It's great Chinyanan didn't realize what Shang Guandandan meant. She was not arrogant in the first place, but Zhou Shuling was sitting in the shadow position. When people scan, their eyes will naturally pass faster to less conspicuous or less important positions, not to Zhou Shuling. Zhou Shuling is gentle and considerate, a traditional and kind-hearted little woman, and is very good to her brother. Chinyanan has no reason to be dissatisfied and hostile to her. You must know that those who are hostile to a woman like Zhou Shuling, or even want to target her, are basically like the vicious female supporting characters in TV dramas. Against the backdrop of the aura of the White Lotus heroine, she will be criticized by thousands of people, and she will end up tragically to repay the audience. Yes, I can make some snacks and side dishes. Usually Lu Chang'an has to cook all the big dishes at home, otherwise he will dislike me for wasting good ingredients. Zhou Shuling said embarrassedly. What she cooked was indeed small dishes. Damn it, Miss Jean is a master at making big things. Last time she made a camel for everyone to eat. It's just that Dan is also a person who has seen the big world. Zhou Shuling knows that whether it is a gadget or a big guy, Dan's happiness is no different. Chinyanan smiled and nodded, but she was extremely vigilant in her heart. She found that Zhou Shuling was like a peerless master in martial arts novels, with every move like an antelope hanging its horns, leaving no trace. To say that Zhou Shuling is green tea, no one would agree except for herself. It would appear that she is looking for trouble and is narrow-minded. But to say that Zhou Shuling did not covet Lu Chang'an at all, Qin Yinan absolutely did not believe it. Is this what people often call the natural black belly? Bah, Qin Yinan has nothing wrong with her belly, only a child. Would you like to eat something together? Lu Chang'an made way for Qin Yinan, took a pig's trotter and stood aside. There were 3 women in a play. She could sit down and act slowly while Lu Chang'an watched from the side. Standing still wouldn't delay him from having his midnight snack. There are a lot of things going on in school today. Qin Yinan tried to chat with Lu Chang'an calmly and naturally. Some things, even if they give people the feeling of happening in a dream, the physical and psychological experiences are real, not to mention that they have indeed helped Qian get something. Qin Yinan faced him. It's inevitable that your face will get hot sometimes. It's just that women are weak by nature, but mothers need steel. Good steel should be used on the face. Qin Yinan touched her cheek and adjusted her mentality. She couldn't be so shy. What about next time? How could she always look timid and weak? Those who like to make trouble are all in trouble. How can we not be too troublesome? Lu Chang'an is a law-abiding person. When he sees those who like to make trouble, he will give in. So today in school, besides being annoyed by Zhu Huntang for a while, it was quite quiet and peaceful around me. Keeping one's own integrity is a philosophy of life that has been upheld by ordinary people for thousands of years. It can ensure that one has a better chance of living a stable life, and Lu Chang'an has also learned this. Who likes to make trouble? Everyone must live in harmony. Petty fights are inevitable, but be sure not to cut each other with knives. Splashing blood will be a bloody disaster, which is a bad sign. Shang Guandandan instructed everyone, and then ate. After taking a bite of the meat sandwich, I wanted to say something, but my cheeks were already bulging and I couldn't speak at this time, so I had to give up. How could it be? No, no. Qin Yinan waved his hands with a smile. The flash of swords, blood, and 10 swords flashed between the corners of his eyebrows, eyes, and lips. At most, it would cause myocardial infarction, chest congestion, and brain swelling. It is still relatively difficult to make the opponent cough up blood and see red after 3 fights. After saying that, Qin Yinan sat down and winked at Qin Zici, who was looking complicated next to him, indicating that he would create an opportunity for her to have another contact with Lu Chang'an. Qin Zici understood what his cousin meant. The gentle and charming beautiful woman was the one he had seen the last time he went to Lu Chang'an's house. It was the girl whose cousin showed a hint of welcome that really made Qin Zici curious. The girl's face is exquisite and beautiful. This kind of pampered temperament, which seems to have been made by absorbing the essence of heaven and earth, Qin Zici has only seen in her cousin's teenage years, and Miss Susan of the Zhu family, who makes people frown when she thinks of it. She is 15 or 16 years old, but her childishness still remains. When her cheeks swell, her whole face looks innocent and elegant. She wears 2 hairpins with pink and white hair balls on her head, and her long black hair is spread on the girl's slender and soft back. Above, the traditional clothing with wide robes and large sleeves, fine texture of gold silk and embroidery, is elegant and upright, and fits her perfectly. It looks like some little princess from ancient times has traveled through time. How could such a young girl let her cousin show such a posture? Could it be that, like Lu Chang'an, he is also an extraordinary person hiding in the market? Qin Zici could only think of this possibility. If the other party had a strong background in reality, he would never be able to please his cousin. More investigation and confirmation are needed. It would be great if Lu Chang'an and this girl were both capable of surpassing the Transformers Mrs. Susan could provide. Classmate Lu, what a coincidence, Qin Zici said to Lu Chang'an, who was chewing pig's trotters. She felt a little emotional. These 3 people could really eat. There were more than 10 plastic food boxes stacked on the small round table, as well as huge beef ribs that could only be packed in long plastic bags. Normally, this would be at least 7 or 8 people. The portion size, right? As for the title Classmate Lou, it was naturally a clever change after knowing some of his personal information, and the relationship was considered a relative. When we first met Lu Chang'an, the oppressive feeling of a hidden master was much lessened. "You want to eat some too," Lu Chang'an said, pointing to the pile of food boxes. Qin Zici shook her head. How could she want to eat here? Lu Chang'an glanced at Qin Zici. This girl is really unpleasant. People who turn a blind eye to so many delicious foods are usually very thoughtful. I visited several places today and I feel that Mr. Lu has a strong presence. In the case of Jin Ho, it was found that you and Jin Ho had a dispute and even fed ceramic shards to others. There was also a case of Yu Chao. The deceased was last I bullied a woman once when I went to the vegetable market, and the surveillance showed that you were watching the fun. There was also a case of a giant python eating people in a hotel, and you were eating at the buffet there. What Qin Zici just said, what a coincidence, is actually not. It was a chance encounter, but it was a case that I investigated, and he was everywhere. Lu Chang'an does have certain suspicions, but he is the person specially recommended to him by his great-grandfather. If he starts investigating Lu Chang'an as soon as he comes to Juncha, how can he explain to his great-grandfather? There were also other considerations that made Qin Zici unable to be cautious. A few days ago, my gums were swollen and sore, and I couldn't write. Today, I feel better. I'm really immortal. Author, Chu Lian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 1039. After speaking a little tentatively, Qin Zici saw a hint of worry in Lu Chang'an's expression. This is normal. Anyone who is said so by someone with an official status like Qin Zici will be more or less worried that he will be involved in trouble or even become a suspect. None of these things were done by me. Lu Chang'an thought about it worriedly for a moment, and finally breathed a sigh of relief and confirmed this. Jin Ho went crazy and Zhang's Hongai disappeared. It was his father, Professor Lu Jianxi, who collaborated with Li Hongfang to commit the crime. Yu Chao is the boss of Fui Vegetable Company, and the group of gangsters were all dealt with by the Minotaur like shredded chicken. As for the big python-eating Shen Bin, who brought a shadow to Songdazi, it was Shang Guandandan who did it. The murderer was there happily because she was surrounded by her 2 favorite daughters-in-law, and the meat sandwich in her hand was also special tasty. It cannot be said that Lu Chang'an has no relevant responsibilities at all. After all, he did not report the information and was suspected of sheltering criminals. I didn't say it was you who did it, Qin Zici responded. That's good. Lu Chang'an continued to eat pig's trotters and said to Qin Zici, you can try pig's trotters. This kind of pig's trotters is called lazy pig's trotters and is huge. Pig's trotters are the richest place in the pig's taste. It has skin, tendons, meat, marrow juice, and gum, and is basically as delicious as a pigtail. If it's roasted pig's trotters, it's just fine. This kind of braised pork is too fat. Qin Zici didn't want Lu Chang'an to change the subject, and continued, I heard a lot about you from Sister Yanan, but I feel like she's a little bit secretive. You are secretive. It seems that you are a person with many secrets. Secrets? Who doesn't have a few little secrets? I don't think she was guarding against me and refused to tell your secret directly. She probably wanted me to get to know you on my own. After getting your approval, you will naturally follow the old man's wishes and help me open up the county. Sha situation. Qin Zici brushed aside the hair covering the corners of his eyes, revealing bright eyes and a heroic profile, and looked doubtfully at Lu Chang'an, who was chewing pig's trotters seriously in front of him. You're just curious about my abilities. Lu Chang'an didn't bother to show off. Let's put it this way, you can stir up trouble in Juncha and beat the beasts like dogs. If you really provoke the big guys, come to me again. Qin Zici was stunned for a moment. She understood what he meant, but she couldn't believe it for a moment. The big ones among the alien beasts were naturally the kings of alien beasts who had never appeared before. Those alien beasts had their own names in the Book of Mountains and Seas, legendary traces, such as mirages of past contact. A team from Chinza's department encountered a mirage while performing a mission and was trapped for more than 10 days. They almost ran out of ammunition and food before being rescued. The rescue team used the dual-band radar on the large drive. Finally determined the location of the missing team's ship and equipment. According to reliable information from the intelligence department, the mirage is also lurking in Juncha, leaving no trace. If a strange beast of this level appears, Chinza thinks it will be difficult to deal with it. Can he really count on Lu Chang'an then? After Lu Chang'an and Chinza chatted for a while, they finished eating the pig's trotters. Chinza saw him walking back, grabbing a round child from the void. The child didn't struggle, but just took a bunch of pig head meat and ate it with gusto. Lu Chang'an sat down, hugged the child and put it on his lap, and the two of them began to clear the other late-night snacks on the table. When everyone had almost finished eating, Chinza and Qinyanan waved goodbye, and saw the child walking next to Lu Chang'an, with his hands close to the outside of his pants and his head held high like a flying Astro Boy. After walking a few steps, the child suddenly jumped up. Lu Chang'an's arm just lifted up, then fell down, and accurately clamped the child under his arm. The child immediately dropped his hands and feet and became motionless. Chinza wanted to laugh when he saw this kind of silly tacit understanding, but the girl jumped up again and covered Lu Chang'an's back like a turtle shell. Chinza finally couldn't help but laugh, and saw that his cousin was used to it and was talking to him. The beautiful woman smiled and said polite words such as "Come to my house for dinner next time." This family. Chinza didn't know how to put it well. It's quite interesting. It's really like a family, Qinyanan corrected without much concern. She just explained an objective fact. There is a big difference between a family and like a family. The woman originally rented a house from her cousin's house. I bought a house upstairs. My cousin saw that it was not easy for her to be a single mother with a child, so she took good care of her. She reciprocated the favor and usually helped with housework and meals in daily life, which was also very good of a person. Qinyanan watched Lu Chang'an and his entourage walk away. Unfortunately, she was with Chinza today, so it was not convenient to leave her to accompany Dan Dan. She was just chatting and playing with Dan Dan. She was not greedy for anything else. Nutrition was too much. Even if he bites off more than he can chew, Qinyanan is not a person who can't afford to leave early without profit. Sister Yanan, is that little girl Lu Chang'an's sister? After Chinza finished speaking, he felt that there was something wrong with this speculation. Why do everyone seem to be so flattering to her? Maybe it's because she's so cute. Don't you feel the same way? Don't you think she puffs up her cheeks when eating, pouts when talking, widens her eyes when looking at people, or makes any small movements, even just waving her hands casually? Tilting her head, kicking her feet, etc., are all so cute. Of course Qinyanan couldn't tell the truth to Chinza. Shangguan Dandan is basically a detached existence, just like the battle between good and evil in the legend of mortal cultivation of immortality, where Jizu and Jidan are fighting to the death. The old monster nascent soul is plotting behind the scenes, but Tianese #1 god transforming monk is facing him. People just watched. The chaos of strange beasts in Juncha has nothing to do with Shangguan Dandan anyway, so he should not be involved. Naturally, there is no need for Chinza to know more about Shangguan Dandan. Chinza was dubious. The little girl was indeed very cute, at least about 1,000 times more cute than Miss Susan when she was 15 or 16 years old. But was this the reason why Qinyanan and the beautiful woman were so obedient to her and obeyed her every word? Lu Chang'an, like many times, walked home with one under his arm, one on his back, and another pulling his clothes. As soon as Zhou Dongdong landed, he went to get the tablet. Shang Guandandan slid off his back and stood in the middle of the living room. He decided to observe Lu Chang'an's movements first. If he went to play on the computer, Shang Guandandan would naturally have to give priority to him. Playing with computers. Zhou Dongdong, when will you do your homework? Zhou Shuling decided to actively supervise Zhou Dongdong to study and not let her get addicted to games. The game she played this afternoon was actually very fun, which made Zhou Shuling feel the danger of addiction. I'm done, Zhou Dongdong said loudly. Mom, I teach you how to play games, but you don't even know how to play. Why don't I know how to play? Zhou Shuling felt that her mother's authority had been questioned and her self-esteem could not accept it. She sat down and carefully observed Zhou Dongdong's operations. She definitely didn't know how to play either. Lu Chang'an glanced at the little mother who was always ready to grab the tablet with her child, and then at Shang Guandandan who was still standing in the middle of the living room, and decided not to do anything, just sit on the sofa and dream. Shang Guandandan hesitated for a moment, then walked over and took the remote control to turn on the TV, then sat next to Lu Chang'an and leaned against him. Look at the news, Lu Chang'an said. No, I want to watch forensic Qin Ming. I faint from corpses. Children lie and wet the bed at night. Shang Guandandan touched his inner thigh to see if he wet his pants. Go downstairs and take a look. How long have your TVs been turned on? I only have two, one big and one small. Give me the remote control. The two of them fought for the remote control for a while, but Lu Chang'an failed. Shang Guandandan took his arm and put it on her shoulders, squeezing in front of his chest and exposing half of her face to stare at the various corpses shown on the TV. It had just been released, it was very fresh, and the mosaics had not been added yet. Shang Guandandan was frightened when she saw it. She decided not to fake her death when she was shot in the future, so as not to be taken for an autopsy. In the pre-Qin period, there was actually an injury examination similar to that of forensic doctors. It is recorded in Book of Rites Yuling that Meng Qiu's Moon, numerology, looks at injuries, examines wounds, sees fractures, makes judgments, and decides on prison cases and justice. In the Western Han Dynasty, the person who did this was called Ling Shi, someone who specialized in autopsies. In ancient times, there was a man named Song Ci who wrote the Resolution of Wrongs, which was equivalent to the forensic doctor Qin Ming 800 years ago. Lu Chang'an put his arms around Shang Guandandan's round and delicate shoulders, felt that her little body was shaking slightly and her face was even pale, so he said some aside to soothe her emotions. Then is this Song Ci? The scene of a corpse was shown on the TV again. Shang Guandandan's legs were curled up on the sofa, and he was climbing on Lu Chang'an's chest, asking with wide-eyed fear. Of course it's not me. Regarding the dissection of corpses, I must have done more in the period when humans were just born, right? In Song Ci's time, I was no longer interested. Lu Chang'an waved his hand. Then when you were in the Han Dynasty, why did you like to take people to make elixirs, or feed others strange elixirs, and then do strange things with you? Shang Guan raised his head and looked at Lu Chang'an. He asked softly in his ear. Is this the case? Lu Chang'an stretched his neck and tilted his head back to keep his distance from her. There is such a thing. Even if I wrote you more than 1,000 accusations, some of which I am embarrassed to write, it does not mean that you have not done it. Shang Guandandan touched his head. Knowing his mistakes can make a lot of improvements, and she also it's not too fussy, after all, that happened more than 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. Watch TV. Qin Ming said that an adult needs to drink 16 milliliters of urine after swimming for 45 minutes. If you swim too much, your mouth will feel sour, which means you drink too much urine. Lu Chang'an changed the subject skillfully and naturally. Next, let's go swimming in Zhu Huntang's private pool next time. You want to drink Xiaotang's corpse water? Shang Guandandan looked at Lu Chang'an in surprise. She had always been able to accept that people who had been emperors were a bit perverted, but was this too much? Lu Chang'an picked up Shang Guandandan and threw her next to Zhou Shuling. Go talk to your beloved daughter-in-law. He doesn't want to say another word to her until tomorrow morning. It's a new month, AAOAO is asking for a monthly pass, there will be an amusement park in the next chapter, Bimi is asking for a monthly pass. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 1040. It was another lazy Saturday, the first day of the tomb sweeping day holiday. The rain did not come. There was a lot of moisture in the air, there was a hint of rain and the sky was gloomy. It was not a refreshing morning. A lamb with dark eyes, pure white and soft fur, a light body, and wearing a diaper was particularly excited on a morning like this. The brown sheep's hooves made a tuk-tuk sound on the road. Miss Zuzuhi rushed out of the special elevator, ran around the entire Bailong Center 10 times, and then jumped to an elevator in Building 2. Yet, seeing that the elevator had not opened for a long time, the lamb jumped up without hesitation and hit the elevator door with its horns, which were hidden in the wool and were only as big as crispy horns. Baa. 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 The elevator door was undamaged, but the little sheep's head was buzzing, but he felt a little unconvinced, so he bumped into it several times without hesitation. After a few clicks, the buzzing only became more intense. The lamb twisted around, jumped around a few times, and bleated loudly at the monitor, not wanting to hit the elevator door again. When I turn back into a eldest lady, I will have the elevator door demolished to take revenge on it. At this time, the elevator door finally opened, and Zhang Xinhan walked out, looking at the little lamb in front of him with a smile, shaking his head, as if he wanted to hit anyone and anything he saw. Little sheep, come in. Zhang Xinhan came to pick up the little sheep, because she and the security staff had received the message pushed by Jin Xiaomei. This little sheep was the third lady's favorite pet, and she issued an order to see the little sheep as soon as she saw it. Third lady. Xiao Yang rushed into the elevator, jumped on the sofa covered with cashmere blanket, and walked up and down on it. She was a little angry that it was not Zhongqing who came to pick her up. It was inconvenient and she immediately issued an order to get the annoying person. The elevator door was torn down. Zhang Xinhan is his mother's confidant, not Zhu Huntang's confidant, and his confidentiality level is lower than Zhongqing's. Xiao Yang doesn't want her to know that he is Zhu Huntang. The most important thing is that Zhang Xinhan is only 34C, which is really weak. She is basically slightly stronger than Yan Qingcheng, so Xiao Yang has no interest in holding her in her arms and developing her into his confidant. Little sheep, what are you doing here so early in the morning? Zhang Xinhan still liked this kind of pet that seemed to have low IQ, acted stupidly, and was full of energy. Baa, the little sheep yelled. Stupid humans actually tried to communicate with Baa using human language. Can they speak Baa? Just illiterate. Baa. Baa, Zhang Xinhan imitated the cry twice and bent down to touch the lamb's back. Yeah. Baa. The sound of sheep bleating one after another sounded in the elevator. When Zhang Xinhan saw the elevator reaching the 60th floor, she quickly stopped imitating the sheep's bleating, because further up was the third wife's residence. Last year when the third lady was in Junxia, she chose the hotel cladding in a low-key manner, mainly because the decoration of the second building was much more knightly than that of the first building, and she could not squeeze in with the third lady. In the eyes of many people, it may be difficult to understand how many floors can't accommodate a mother and daughter. In fact, it is livable, but the original design configuration is exclusive to Zhuhantang. For example, Zhuhantang has 4 cloakrooms, and only one of the highest standard large cloakrooms is designed. Should the third wife be allowed to use the clothes that Zhuhantang originally only used to play dress-up games? A small cloakroom. There is no room for clothes, shoes, and hats. There are also arrangements for the entourage. There is basically no spare room in Building 1 to accommodate the third wife's huge entourage. Building 1 does not have so much free space to arrange personal belongings, vehicles, helicopters, and other means of transportation. If the house was originally designed for living together, it would naturally have sufficient hardware and software configurations. For example, in a large house in Taiwan, the mother and daughter's bedrooms are next to each other. Arriving at the floor where the third wife's bedroom was located, as soon as the elevator door opened, the little sheep rushed out and floated away like a somersault cloud, like a ball of white cotton. Zhang Xinhan was still wearing high heels and couldn't catch up at all, but considering that Zhongqing was on duty in that area now, she didn't ask anyone to stop the lamb and let it go. Anyway, if the third wife was disturbed, she would only get angry when she got up. At the first person to appear beside her, the little lamb rushed into the bedroom, jumped on the bed, and used his two front hooves to play with the particularly plump area under the quilt. Su Mei frowned in her sleep. She felt that Master Ye had changed his position and became more brave. A moan escaped from his lips, and then he felt something was wrong. He squinted his eyes and looked back, and saw the person facing Qiao. The lamb stepped on her ass hard. Zhu Huntang, Su Mei was furious. Her dream was at a critical moment when she was woken up by this little mutton skewer. Hey! If you don't get up yet, take me to play. The little sheep changed positions and stepped on her shoulders again. Su Mei glanced at the ceiling, where the weather conditions and time slowly appeared, showing the scenery of Junxia City, and she couldn't help but become even more annoyed. You're crazy, it's only 5:30. The lamb jumped over and over Su Mei, jumping back and forth several times. Su Mei pulled the quilt. She really wanted to stand up and shake the quilt, but then she saw the lamb skewers being bounced back and forth on the ceiling and floor. It's just that she hasn't slept as comfortably as she did last night for a long time, and her whole body is lazily, a bit like the weak state she had when she was pregnant with Zhu Huntang. At that time, her physique had been greatly strengthened, but she often felt weak. It was the embryo in her body that was warning her that it had absorbed too much nutrients and was not developing enough. If I had known at that time that I would be born such a naughty thing after suffering so much pain, would I not be so positive and expectant? Don't you know? This is an amusement park that does not have a reserved area. Everyone queues up very early. If you go late, you will have to wait for a long time, Xiao Yang said very positively. After saying that, he started jumping again, jumping from here to there, jumping from there to here. Really, Su Mei really didn't know much about this. Who would care about whether to queue up? She never had to worry about the chores of life. The little sheep jumped off the bed, bit the corner of the quilt, grabbed the ground with all four hooves and stepped back, trying to pull Su Mei's quilt down so that she had to get up. The beautiful body is wrapped in silky pajamas. The lying posture of the beauty in the morning is extremely lazy. However, there is no timely charm and spring water between Su Mei's eyebrows. It feels like boiling water boiled by anger. What's the point of getting up so early? Can I just go with you? Su Mei reached out and groped around for a while, but couldn't find anything convenient to throw at it, so she had an idea and moved the disaster to Chang'an. Xiao Yang hurriedly ran to the glass curtain wall and looked down. Since building number 2 was more than 100 meters shorter than building number 1, the view was obstructed to a certain extent. It was not the best place to observe the surroundings of the sycamore tree. In addition, the gloomy naturally, there was no movement in the weather. I'm going to wake up Daddy, the little sheep ran away happily again. Listening to the lamb's tail hidden in the diaper, swaying back and forth and making an unpleasant scratching sound in the diaper, Su Mei pressed her forehead and yawned, and then took another look at the sheep's hoof prints on the quilt with the Republican-style pattern. After all, I couldn't bear to continue sleeping on such a bed, so I had to tap the sensing area beside the bed to call people in. Zonking's makeup was exquisite. She walked to the bedside and squatted down to pick up the quilt. When she saw the sheep's hoof prints on it, she was shocked and suppressed a smile. Miss San can't usually get up so early. It seems she still wants to you. Do you think she came to see me? She wanted to go to the amusement park because she was afraid that I would get up late. Sume stretched out her fingers and tapped her wrist. Look what time it is now. Of course Zhongqing knew what time it was, but he just looked at the watch on his wrist out of habit, laughed again, and said gently, she has been asking about the sheep doll costume more than 10 times. She has always been thinking about it. I personally called the amusement park and asked a lot of questions, although the customer service staff at the amusement park were a little confused by her strange questions and requests. Sume clasped her hands on her chest, shook her head, and chuckled. She was almost out of breath after getting up, and then asked, "Why are you here? You have to remember that you don't have to be responsible for my life affairs now. As a group executive, you should arrange your time allocation between work and life more rationally." "I'm used to it." Zhongqing didn't say much. "Hey, ask someone to put the sheep costume in the nanny's car, and I'll change it at the amusement park. The sheep doll suit has a zipper. Should we arrange for the zipper to get stuck or not be able to take it off, and then ask Lu Chang'an for help?" Sume hesitated for a moment and shook her head. Now that she had the help of the lamb skewers, she didn't need these superfluous arrangements. The little sheep came down from upstairs, ran half a circle around Bailong Center, took a shortcut and jumped over the low fence, almost hitting the sycamore tree in a sprint, and then dragged it up the stairs with its hooves, and came to Lu Chang'an bedroom. Baa baa. Baa baa baa. Lu Chang'an was half asleep when he heard the sound of sheep braying. His first thought was that he had suffered a nervous breakdown from Zhu Huntang. He even heard her bleeding in his dreams. Because of her relationship, Lu Chang'an has already experienced symptoms such as blood pressure spikes and heart burst. It is not impossible for him to suffer from neurasthenia again. "It seems that my physique is not as strong as I thought. No, I am actually strong enough. The main reason is that Zhu Huntang's destructive power is beyond normal. No wonder he is relatively fragile." "What?" There was another loud shout, and Lu Chang'an opened his eyes slightly and saw a lamb putting its head on the side of his bed, twitching its ears and shouting loudly less than 10 centimeters in front of his face. From a close distance, the eyes are like big black pearls, the sheep's nose and mouth are pink and moist, and the three-petal mouth makes its expression always particularly vivid, and it is a little stupid with as much cuteness as a finger. "You." Lu Chang'an stretched out his hand and grabbed the sheep's head, touched the quilt with his other hand, took out his phone and took a look at it, glaring at the lamb. 5:49. "Are you a senior in high school? You got up so early. Hey. Get up, take me out to play. I'm going to the amusement park today." The lamb stood up, put its two soft lamb hooves on the edge of the bed, stretched its head forward and spoke loudly in his ear. "Your amusement park opens at 6 o'clock, right?" Lu Chang'an said angrily. "You have to queue up at amusement parks. If you go late, you will have to queue up for a long time, and you will be at the end of the queue. You will fall behind like 3 pieces of cake pulled by a snake." The little sheep took out a pair of sheep. Mom's words. In order to show that the consequences of being late would be very serious, he even compared the whole family of 3, including himself, to Daddy Grains. "You think I've never been to an amusement park? The only amusement park in China where you have to queue up early in the morning is Disney, the Lgip Holy Land. The amusement park in Junxia doesn't open until 9 a.m. Lu Chang'an and An Nuan just met last year. Hui, Zhongqing, and others visited Window of the World together. Junxia is a large amusement park that has been open for 20 years. Zhuhantang's own amusement park will not officially open for business for another 19 years, and Zhongqing also promised to give it VIP treatment. I don't care. Get up quickly, I'm going to the amusement park." The little sheep jumped onto the bed and jumped around. Because Lu Chang'an doesn't like to sleep in the middle of the bed like the mother sheep, but sleeps on the edge. The lamb can't jump across his body, so it jumps directly on him. Huh, the lamb jumped a few times, but it felt something was wrong. The soft lamb's hoof stepped on it, and it yelled, "You didn't do anything when you got up in the morning and you died. Lu Chang'an is healthy. Isn't this a matter of course?" Suddenly he became a little angry and grabbed it and spanked it. Ba-ah, the little sheep collapsed next to Lu Chang'an and cried loudly. He stretched out his front hooves to touch his swollen butt, but he couldn't reach it and found that his butt was bare. He cried even louder, "Damn old man, you took off all the diapers. Doesn't the little sheep have no sense of shame?" The little sheep has a sense of shame. You can't even be considered a girl now, at most you can be considered a mother. Lu Chang'an had already sat up and said angrily. The quilt was full of sheep's hoof marks, so he had to call it. The baker took it and washed it before sending it back. "I am the little fairy sheep, and you are the great fairy goat, we are of the same kind. We of the same kind have to be ashamed when facing the opposite sex. As the saying goes, if a son avoids his mother, you cannot strip him naked, and if a daughter avoids her father, you should also. You can't knock off all my diapers." The lamb kicked him with its two hind hooves, keeping a distance from him, and pulled at random with its two front hooves, reasoning with him confidently. "Do you still know the saying that a child avoids his mother when he is older, and a daughter avoids her father when she is older?" Lu Chang'an grabbed its two sheep hooves and laughed. "Then why don't you say daughter is older when you usually crawl around on me? Are you avoiding your father? I was acting like a spoiled child. Don't you like it when I act like a spoiled child to you? Every time I act like a spoiled child, don't you always feel so sweet and happy in your heart that you like me so much?" The little sheep rubbed it twice. She moved her body to his chest and put her head on his neck and chin to act coquettishly. "Is it true that you have a loving father and a filial daughter, so that you will have no regrets in this life? If you weren't afraid of breaking my glass, I would throw you downstairs right now." Lu Chang'an grabbed its hooves and threw it aside. The little sheep jumped up and scratched, opened the window, and then turned to look at him. Lu Chang'an grabbed it without hesitation, danced with his hands, and threw the struggling lamb from the window downstairs. "Ah! What a bad old man! Someone is killing girls. He wants to make a kebab out of me. Lu Chang'an, this moldy little biscuit is rotten tofu and a stinky bug." The little sheep stood downstairs and cursed a few times, then went upstairs again. Standing at the door of the bedroom, a sheep's head stuck out and stared at him with wide eyes. "Go and wake up your mother," Lu Chang'an exhaled. He had no choice but to get up because he couldn't fall asleep anymore. "I'll be there at 5:30. Xiao Yang walked in, walked around the bed and came to where he was sleeping, and put his head on the quilt to look at him. Thinking that Sumei would be so angry when she woke up at 5:30, Lu Chang'an suddenly felt that he was not so sad about being woken up at 5:49. "Then how did you get here at 5:49? She lives in building 2 of Bailong Center. Come down from her side, go through the landscape belt and then go through the alley, jump over the wall and come in, and you will be here soon. I usually stay on the top floor to observe the city below." As for the landscape, Xiao Yang already knew the layout of the surrounding buildings very well. "Don't you think you're too excited? Why am I not excited to go to an amusement park with you for the first time? I have grown so big and it is your first time to take me to an amusement park. Don't you feel a little guilty?" Xiao Yang asked loudly. It seemed to make sense. Lu Chang'an sighed, lifted the quilt and got up, kicked off his slippers and went to wash up. "Monthly ticket, I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 1041. Xiao Yang jumped on the sofa and walked around a few times. He imitated Lu Chang'an's usual posture of slumped on the sofa watching TV and lay there for a while. Then he got under the electric heating table and stuck his head out from the middle of the heating blanket. He felt that the perspective here was unique. No wonder Dandan and Dong Dong like to squeeze in here and watch TV. Next time I come to play, I will squeeze in here with them and watch TV. But I still want to look like a lamb. If I squeeze in such a beautiful girl, there won't be enough room. Getting out of the electric heating table, it felt like he hadn't seen the bad old man for a long time. The little sheep jumped to the door of the bathroom and stood with his head raised to look at him. It's the Qingming holiday now. Speaking of Qingming, have you thought of any poems, songs, cultural allusions, etc.? Lu Chang'an is good at teaching and educating people. Naturally, he wants to incorporate education into every aspect of life, so he casually inspires and guides Xiao Yang. Do you think I'm illiterate? Aren't you? Lu Chang'an turned to look at her in surprise. Seeing his expression, the lamb angrily raised its front hoof and kicked him. Qingming Festival is a festival established since ancient times to commemorate the heroes who died in the fight against the Qing dynasty and the restoration of the Ming dynasty. It is said that when Wei Xiaobao was studying under Chen Jianese, he was in love with Chen Jianese's daughter Chen Yuanyuan. Wu Gang and Wei Xiaobao betrayed the Tiandihui regardless of their righteousness, which dealt a devastating blow to the anti-Qing and Ming cause. Countless anti-Qing martyrs were massacred, and the Qingming festival was born. From then on, the Tiandihui could only live on a small island in the southeast. You know, we can't do anything on that small island. Xiao Yang sighed. He had been hit by Lu Chang'an repeatedly in Junxia. He often tried to ride on his neck to dominate but failed. This may have something to do with living on the southeastern island for a long time, but now he has settled in Junxia. Gradually absorbing the power of rejuvenation and the aura of national destiny that accompanied the development of the mainland, sooner or later he can seek to usurp the throne and oust the old man from the position of the leader of the 9 provinces Fenglai sword sect. Just as China will inevitably rejuvenate and return to the top of the world, Xiao Yang will also reach the top of the Kyushu Fenglai sword gate. Lu Chang'an was stunned for a moment before he understood what it was talking about. He still remembered the time he had a video chat with Zhu Huntang. She had just woken up and said that she dreamed that she and Lu Chang'an turned into sheep and ate all Wu Sanggui's laurel trees in the Moon Palace. Is King Pingzi Wu Sanggui or Wu Gang? Wu Sanggui. Lu Chang'an shook his head, understanding more and more what Qin Yan'an had done. The pollution ability of this lamb was really extraordinary. Fortunately, he was confident, knowledgeable, and had a solid knowledge structure. If ordinary people stayed with it for a long time, they would be infected sooner or later. Confusing common sense and understanding the world differently from ordinary people, such as Bai Fen. The tomb sweeping day embodies the Han people's thought of pursuing the future with caution. It is also a manifestation of ancestor worship. People believe that as long as future generations never forget, those departed ancestors, heroes, or ordinary souls will still protect future generations into a farther future. Follow it has nothing to do with resisting the Qing dynasty and restoring the Ming dynasty. Lu Chang'an took a deep breath, reminded himself not to get angry, and explained in a calm tone. It has nothing to do with the anti-Qing dynasty and the restoration of the Ming dynasty, so why is it called Qingming Festival? Xiao Yang didn't believe it at all. It has never been superstitious about authority. Even Lu Chang'an made mistakes sometimes. It is the saying that it is better to believe in books than to have no books, especially when a lot of historical and cultural knowledge is written casually by people for fun and does not need to be taken seriously. So she wrote an article, Butterflies in Love with Flowers, the grasses rest in the fading spring, the grasses rest in the waning days of spring. The scenery in the guest house is the Qingming festival again. People in the small courtyard remember farewell at dusk. The falling reds are heard everywhere. So close. The mountains and rivers are divided into Chu and Yu. The eyes are broken and the soul is in ecstasy, and the sound must be endless. The dream is broken at the fifth watch, and the heart is about to break. The sound of the trumpet blows down the plum blossom moon. Lu Chang'an recited a poem. This person must have not had a holiday during the Qingming festival, so he just wrote poems to make others' heads hurt when they recite them. Xiao Yang sneered. Sushi. Sushi. Sushi was from the Song dynasty. He celebrated the Qingming festival. Do you think the origin of the Qingming festival has anything to do with the Qing dynasty and the Ming dynasty? Lu Chang'an spit out the mouthwash in his mouth and almost died when he heard it speak. I swallowed all the mouthwash. Since Qingming festival has nothing to do with the Qing dynasty and the Ming dynasty, then why do these two dynasties happen to be called the Qing dynasty and the other is called the Ming dynasty? Is it because they were both dynasties founded on the Qingming festival? Xiao Yang further thought about historical issues. You go back and ask your mother. Your ancestor of the Zhou family, no, your ancestor, Mrs. Su, got rich in the Ming dynasty. She probably knows. Lu Chang'an pressed his hand on the sink and stared at the drain outlet where the water was flowing out. Point your finger outside to let the sheep slip away. I don't want to ask, and I'm not interested. I just like chatting with you. Even if I'm talking about things that I'm not interested in at all, I'm happy. But if I want to talk to others, even my mother, I'm too lazy to ask. The answer. The answer to the question is not important. What is important is that the conversation is between the little fairy goat and the big fairy goat. The little sheep walked into the bathroom, slipped between his spread legs, looked up at him with dark eyes full of joy. Lu Chang'an was a little helpless. He was so good at teasing. Who would believe that he was not his own child? The lamb slipped between his legs, walked around his calves a few times, and then rubbed its head against his trouser legs. You are the fairy sheep, I am not the fairy sheep. Lu Chang'an refused to admit that he was this inexplicable creature. He held its two small hooves with both hands and placed it outside the bathroom. You are. No. According to my in-depth research on biological genes, it is impossible for a person to gain the ability to turn into a sheep inexplicably. I can only inherit this ability from you. Obviously, this was when the Antarctic people were pregnant, and you supplemented it. She nourished me, and as a baby, I also absorbed the ability you passed on. The lamb squatted on the ground, tilting his head and thinking calmly, just like an egg will turn into a poached egg, it's not that the egg has the ability to turn into a poached egg if it wants to turn into a poached egg, but it has inherited the protein that is heated when it is still in the chicken's belly. This characteristic will be solidified and discovered by humans and exploited. It actually knows that protein will coagulate when heated. Lu Chang'an didn't want to talk, and he didn't bother to talk to it in depth about the denaturation of proteins caused by heating. Because once it talks about the denaturation of proteins by heat, it will interpret denaturation as something strange, and then talk about some topics that make Lu Chang'an emotionally ups and downs. But, why is the ability you passed on to me to transform into a sheep? The only explanation is that your body is the great immortal sheep. Xiao Yang thought again. I told you. I can change anything, and I will turn into the 12 zodiac animals. You are the only one who has realized how to change into a sheep, Lu Chang'an said angrily. Then did you pass on to me the ability to turn into a bleeding dragon? No. I don't believe it. If I learn to transform into a dragon one day, I will bleed too. Maybe that's what some dragons are called. No. Hey. I want to go back and see what types of zodiac signs there are. After saying that, the lamb went to the bedroom to put on its diaper, and then came to the balcony to jump off. At this time, its attention was attracted by a pot of lush green maidenhair fern. Last time it brought another little lamb to play, that little lamb had obviously eaten almost all of the pot of maidenhair fern, and it fully recovered in 2 days. The little sheep looked down and found that there were a lot of tea leaves at the roots of the maidenhair fern, which meant that Lu Chang'an had poured the leftover tea leaves here. This pot of maidenhair fern had absorbed the nutrients from the remaining saliva of Lu Chang'an. If I continue to absorb his nutrients, will I gain more abilities? Thinking about this problem, the lamb inadvertently chewed 2 mouthfuls of maidenhair fern leaves. He was suddenly shocked and spat loudly. It just liked to become a sheep, but it didn't like to eat grass like a sheep. But how can I get his nutrients? It can't also turn into a dragon essence potfly, right? No, my thinking direction is wrong. I shouldn't need to continue to absorb his nutrients, but may be able to provide nutrients. For example, the saliva you just spat out. Thinking of this, the lamb spit at the maidenhair fern a few more times, jumped downstairs, spit at the sycamore tree, came to the gate of the community, and spat at the hamster in the vendor's cage. Drooling, I returned to building 1 of Bailong Center. We will study this kind of thing later. The most urgent thing is that she should put on a sheep doll costume and let her mother and father take her to the amusement park. 8 in the morning. Zhu Huntang looked at his new version of the sheep doll suit. Because it is equipped with an emotion sensing system, the ears and tail will vibrate on their own. It feels particularly cute, especially the lightweight speaker with a bell-like shape on the chest. When touched, it will emit sounds of many sheep. Ba baa, the sound was loud and powerful. So Zhu Huntang equipped each breadman with one. She had the overall control and could make all the bleeding speakers equipped by the breadman scream together, and in an instant, 180,000 bleeding speakers could roar. It's a pity that the sheep mother and father sheep are unwilling to wear this, and now only Zhu Huntang is wearing the sheep doll suit. They are only willing to get in the nanny car to change. In the underground parking lot, Zhongqing, Zhang Xinhan, and Jin Xiaomei were all wearing neat black uniforms and skirts, waiting next to the motorcade. They all wore badges with lamb patterns on their fronts, and the bread people lined up neatly. Gao Xiao, the leader of the breadmen standing in front of the queue, accidentally squeezed the bleeding speaker, and the sound of sheep bleeding suddenly sounded. Gao Xiao was stunned for a moment, and saw some of his colleagues biting their lips, with distorted expressions. Refusing to laugh, the new group of senior security guards across the street either adjusted their glasses or touched their noses, looking around, trying to act as if nothing had happened. Gao Xiao was digging his toes in his leather shoes constantly, and even the insteps were arched, and a thin layer of sweat oozed from his forehead. Feeling the third lady's eyes on him, Gao Xiao quickly lowered his head, but I didn't dare to touch the bleeding speaker anymore. What if I made a mistake and it screamed even louder? Fortunately, the bakers were already familiar with the eldest lady's temperament, so she didn't care about such trivial matters. The loudspeaker beeped for a minute and finally stopped. Call together. Zhu Huntang was inspired to control all the breadman's speakers and make the sound of sheep roaring on the prairie. At this time, Professor Lu Jianxi and Mrs. Zuzan walked out of the elevator. They heard countless sheep bleating. They almost thought there were sheep going out in the underground parking lot. After being stunned for a moment, the two couldn't help but raise their hands to shield themselves. With half of his face, under everyone's attention, he got into the nanny's car without saying a word but with a slight look of embarrassment. Zhu Huntang quickly followed in. How's it going? Does it feel like the ancient emperor went on patrol and thousands of horses were silent? Zhu Huntang Yang was proud. Needless to say, his mother likes to pay attention to pomp and show, and the old man is more casual, but this can finally make him recall the time when he was the emperor. It feels like remembering and comforting me. You are talking about 10,000 sheep and 10,000 horses in silence. 10,000 horses in silence means that all the horses are silent, which describes a depressing feeling. Do you understand? Professor Lu Jianxi corrected. She knew the idiom 10,000 horses in silence, and also not bad. There is a word next to the word that actually means silent. Is there something wrong with the person who coined the word? In short, from now on, the meaning of 10,000 horses in silence means many horses barking together, and it is synonymous with 10,000 sheep in chorus. Zhu Huntang said disapprovingly that since he had redefined its meaning, what it originally meant was not important at all. Why don't we leave the Xinhua dictionary, idiom dictionary, and Chinese textbooks to you to compile? Professor Lu Jianxi said sincerely. Do you think these editing positions are so easy to get? Zhu Huntang reminded the inexperienced Professor Lu Jianxi. Waiting for my Tsundere and Cold Dragon Daddy wants a baby to poop sheep excrement on his head every day. Ball is published, and after winning the Baobel Literature Prize, I can apply to be the editor-in-chief of these books. Her book doesn't seem to be called that. Yes, it's called Tsundere, Fairy Sheep Baby. The title of this book is almost the same as the title of Li Bai's poem. Without the ellipses, it would make people feel like it's just watering down. Professor Lu Jianxi did not remind her that the title of the book was wrong. If you can be the editor-in-chief, I will eat all the books you publish. Haha, I want to trick you into eating and drinking again. No big or small. Mrs. Zuzan knocked her on the head and said to Lu Jianxi, you are the same, you can always quarrel with her. When she talks nonsense, I ignore her. You're wrong. She has a lot of thoughts in her mind. The less you correct her in time, the easier it is for her to go astray. No wonder she is so weird now. It's because you always turn a blind eye to her erratic words and deeds. One eye was not properly disciplined in time. Lu Jianxi glanced at the bright-faced Mrs. Zuzan, who was wearing a light pink cheongsam and had a gentle temperament. He had just wasted some time on it, but her custom-made cheongsam actually had problems with the zipper on the back, leaving a faint red mark on her snow-smooth skin, which reminded him of many scenes. Okay, you discipline her well. Mrs. Zuzan is no longer the girl who wanted to argue with him about right and wrong in everything. She just knew that if he really disciplined her well, he would not call her back from Antarctica. Now, I haven't stayed in Antarctica for long, but I was nicknamed Antarctic by Zhu Huntang, which was a bit disappointing. If you stay in Junxia for a long time, will you be called a Changsharan? Go and change your clothes quickly, Zhu Huntang urged. He was the only one wearing a sheepdoll suit, which didn't look like Bimei's house at all. Lu Jianxi and Mrs. Zuzan looked at each other, but they didn't pretend to be pretentious. They went to the bedroom in the rear compartment to change clothes. The sheepdoll clothes prepared by Zhu Huntang were relatively complex in structure, so it was a bit difficult for one person to wear them, not to mention the difficulty in changing them. Not completely naked. After changing into doll clothes and coming out, Mrs. Zuzan gave Zhu Huntang a rolling look. Are you satisfied? You have to be more obedient in the future, otherwise I won't be as good looking as you. Lu Jianxi looked at the middle-aged and elderly sheep in the mirror and frowned. When he saw someone sorting out the 12 zodiac signs, he should have kicked out the sheep from the 12 zodiac signs. It didn't seem to make any sense. I should be more sensible. In fact, it is Zhu Huntang that makes people angry, and it is not a creature like sheep. It is cute and delicious, and is a good friend of mankind just like dogs. Zhu Huntang tilted his head and looked at the sheep father and mother. He felt satisfied. Like other children, his parents participated in various activities with him. I often see in the news a child's father dressing up as a dinosaur, Ultraman, etc. to pick up the children from school. Zhu Huntang is more or less envious. Although I have passed the age where I am very attached to my parents and want them to accompany me in everything, I still have regrets in my heart. Now it feels like some new pictures have been painted out of the once empty space in my memory. Having a lively and lovely daughter, accompanying her willful parents, are the warm colors common in ordinary families. Zhu Huntang is a fairy, but all fairies in history would rather become mortals for the things that attract them in the mortal world, and Zhu Huntang is no exception. Let's be immortal playing happily with mom and dad today. Hey! Come and take a photo, Zhu Huntang took out his mobile phone and asked them to take a selfie together. In the photo, Ms. Zuzan is covering herself up, Professor Lu Jianxi is expressionless and turns to look to the side. Only Zhu Huntang is smiling, and her dark, soft, and bright eyes are moist. We set off at around 8 o'clock, but there was a bit of delay on the road. In addition, the convoy always moved slower, so we arrived at the window of the World Amusement Park after 9 o'clock. It's all you who are complaining, Zhu Huntang was the first to jump out of the car. The park is open, what if we have to queue up later? Qingming Festival is a natural solar term and a traditional festival. In addition to sweeping tombs and worshipping ancestors, there are also outings. There are indeed a lot of people out to play. Professor Lu Jianxi looked around while talking, but saw a familiar Porsche Macan stopped nearby. He couldn't help but reach into his trouser pocket and turn off his phone. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 1042. There are approximately 6.7 million Porsche owners in China. Like most car companies, domestic car owners can always enjoy some special benefits, such as US dollar refunds abroad and domestic compensation vouchers if there is a problem. Unlike other luxury car brands, which have an advantage in the proportion of male car owners, the ratio of men to women among Porsche car owners is basically 50:50. Recently, Juncha has added a Macan owner named Lu Yuang. Does a Macan owner count as a Porsche owner? In the eyes of Porsche and other Porsche owners, it probably doesn't count. But a stunning beauty like Lu Yuang, even if she is driving a car like Macan, is so radiant and impressive that ordinary people like Professor Lu Jianxi have to avoid her and hope not to meet her today. Professor Lu Jianxi did some calculations. Assuming that Professor Lu is 38, his feet are 23 centimeters long, the soles are 8 centimeters wide, the heels are 5 centimeters wide, and the big toes are 3 centimeters long. The total area is about 38 plus 5 add 8, 23 minus 3 minus 5, add 3.14 2.5 2.5, which is approximately equal to 239 square centimeters. 239 square centimeters equals 0.0239 square meters. The Juncha World window covers an area of 400,000 square meters. That is to say, if you stand facing the wall, the entire Juncha World window needs to be filled with 16,736,399. Professor Lu. He only then would he have nowhere to hide and be forced to be exposed next to her. Of course, the cross-sectional area of the body is definitely larger than the area of the soles of the feet, especially a shape like Professor Liu's that is convex and backward, which will take up more space. However, considering that this shape can also be placed in a wavy shape, it can be placed on one foot, and it is entirely possible that the entire window of the world can be filled with 16,736,399. Professor Lu. In short, don't worry too much about meeting Professor Lu. Lu Jianxi went back to the nanny car, took out a pair of sunglasses and put them on. Look at them. At this time, a family of 4 passed by. Except for the young man who seemed to be the father, the mother and 2 children looked at Sanmiai's house with envy. That's a doll costume, maybe it's a celebrity performing a show. The young man hesitated for a moment and made a judgment. The battle did not look like ordinary entertainers. How cute, I told you we could dress up and play like this. That's a cosplay of yours. It's so shameful. Your costume also has a tail and sluts, just like a butcher. Disgusting. You are a straight man's cancer. The family of 4 walked away chatting. It seemed that the mother wanted the whole family to wear cosplay costumes for fun, but the father refused. Now seeing the 3 sheep standing here, I couldn't help but feel envious. Others envy us. Zhu Huntang put her hands on her hips proudly, looking left and right proudly, hoping that father and mother sheep would praise her. Having given birth to 2 children, and still having such a playful mind, it seems that although the father is not always obedient, he still dotes on her, so that he can maintain his girlish nature, Mrs. Susan said calmly. Comments on location. Mom, what you said is wrong. A girl's character should depend on herself. Just like Dandan, she is more than 1,000 or 2,000 years old, but she has always been a girl with a cute character, Zhu Huntang said admiringly. I also want to learn from Dan. Even if I control the Zhu Fenglai sword sect in the future, I will still have the image of a girl sect leader, not a resentful woman like the Tianshan child elder. Who do you think is a resentful woman? Mrs. Zhu San raised her hand to hit Zhu Huntang without hesitation. Zhu Huntang hurriedly hid behind Lu Jianxi. He didn't know why his mother's beatings always hurt a lot, and there was a cruel and frightening feeling. It's different when the old man hits someone. He looks very aggressive and often beats her until she cries, but it doesn't feel that terrible, so Zhu Huntang usually forgets the pain before the scar heals. Don't just hit people, be reasonable. She's talking about the Tianshan child mother, not you. Why did you take it in yourself? Lu Jianxi gave Mrs. Susan some guidance on how to raise children. Zhu Huntang stood behind and nodded vigorously in agreement. Mrs. Susan felt that Zhu Huntang was insinuating her, but there was no evidence. Normally, she could just beat her without caring about the evidence, but now that her father was protecting her, how could she be justified in beating a child? I'll take care of you when I get back, Mrs. Zhu San could only whisper. Zhu Huntang hid behind Lu Jianxi, with a proud look on his face that no one could control her, and he wanted to ground her just by looking at her. It's just that Mrs. Susan is not too strict now, lest Zhu Huntang develop a rebellious mentality. She simply blows wind in Lu Jianxi's ears and asks him to send Mrs. Susan back to Antarctica as an Antarctic as soon as possible. Madam, Miss, Sir, the entrance to the park is open, Jin Xiaomei ran over and said. Although the bangs that were still flying in the air had not fallen down to her forehead, and she felt a little rushed, she immediately straightened her posture when she stood and spoke. Her breathing was steady, and her speaking speed was slow. Jin Xiaomei's basic professional ability is still good, but her eyes glanced. The gentleman paused a little longer. Of course she recognized it. This was the man who rescued her, Guan Yuan, Ma Benwei and the others from the air raid shelter that day. He left calmly after the rescue, leaving Jin Xiaomei, who was still a little confused at the time, with no time to say thank you. It turns out that he has such a close relationship with the third wife, no wonder he was asked by the third wife to save people. It's just that the third wife has a special status and has such a close relationship with a man in Juncha. Zhong Qing, Zhang Xinhan and others don't know what to think. The Zhu family, what kind of waves will be caused internally? Fortunately, I am only the third lady's assistant. As long as the third lady's position is stable, no matter how chaotic the Zhu family is, it has nothing to do with Jin Xiaomei. Glancing at Zhong Qing and Zhang Xinhan, there were indeed all kinds of meaningful colors hidden in their eyes. The competition between the two for favors was getting heated for a while, but in the end Zhong Qing was slightly better. He came to Juncha with his third wife earlier. Since then, it has gradually moved away from the single assistant label. Let's go. Lu Jianxi walked slowly and calmly towards the amusement park. Lu Yuwang should have already entered the park. Lu Yuwang's temperament would probably prefer to participate in those events that stimulate the adrenaline hormones first, that is, walking on the right side. As a pedestrian, just walk to the left. There were many people in Sanmiai's house and they were walking through the group tourist channel. When passing the ticket gate, Zhu Huntang pressed the beam speaker again, causing several staff members to hurriedly come to check, thinking that there was a flock of sheep intruding. After entering Window of the World, many children tourists even learned to bleat, which made people think that today was some kind of theme day related to sheep. Lu Jianxi and Mrs. Susan walked in the front with their faces half hidden, trying to keep some distance from Zhu Huntang and her bread man. I didn't expect that you would also be unable to bear the embarrassment and feel ashamed. Mrs. Zhu-san's lips slightly curled up as she looked at Zhu Huntang from a distance behind, holding up a map of the park and looking left and right. In her impression, he was always so calm and elegant, with a strong mind that could handle any situation nonchalantly. When ordinary people felt scared, embarrassed, panicked, palpitated, or ashamed, he would always look calm and then easily control the situation and turn it around. Situation. There are very few times when you don't want others to see your face like this, which makes people find it interesting. Can you bear it? The screams of the sheep finally stopped. Lu Jianxi sighed and looked at Zhu Huntang jumping over. It's okay. Mrs. Zuzan also sighed, telling the truth. I still remember that when Zhu Huntang was a child, she was rummaging through the cabinets at home and found Mrs. Zuzan's massage products to play with. Then she lay on the carpet and poked herself with them while twisting and yelling. Suzuki I found out and asked her where she was. What are you doing? She said she was following her mother's example of exercising. At that time, Mrs. Zuzan wanted to die and even wanted to stuff her back into her stomach. Based on these unbearable past events, wearing a sheep doll costume today is still acceptable. This is the case once a person's threshold is lowered. It's not a good idea to discuss this matter with Lu Jianxi, lest he think she is a woman who is not satisfied with her desires, just for occasional reasons. Go ride a horse. Zhu Huntang rushed over, put his hands on Lu Jianxi's shoulders, and hung his whole body on him, shouting, "You and I ride a horse." A person's words and deeds should conform to his external image. For example, an adult should have the maturity, stability, and external feedback of an adult with a normal worldview. Otherwise, like you, others will think that this little girl did he stop intellectual development when he was 3 years old. Lu Jianxi looked at Zhu Huntang hanging on his chest, his legs dragging the ground and his head raised, and he had to remind her seriously. It was a bit pretentious for a normal 19-year-old girl to behave like a naughty child, but she put on a sheep doll costume and exuded a temperament that was not normal for a human being. This naughty child appearance was actually very suitable for her personality. The perception is estimated. You promised me. If you want to ride a horse with me, I won't care about appearance. Lu Jianxi dragged her there. He didn't want Mrs. Zuzan to know that he bought cosmetics for Yan Qingcheng. Although she knows now, she probably won't do anything to Yan Hui and Yan Qingcheng, but she will definitely keep accounts of this matter, so she doesn't want to implicate Yan Hui, who is gentle and considerate, virtuous and kind, and independent and strong. The well-behaved and sensible Yan Qingcheng. Seeing that Zhu Huntang was going to ride the carousel, Jin Xiaomei started the electric car she rented in the park, quickly came to the carousel area, and pulled the administrator of the facility aside. Jin Xiaomei took out 10,000 yuan. The administrator was startled, stretched out his hand involuntarily, and quickly retracted it. "Beauty, what do you mean? Our lady will come to play the carousel later. We need to briefly disinfect the facilities, which will take about 3 minutes. I hope you can be accommodating then. Tourists will not have any objections when they see the facilities being disinfected while waiting." Jin Xiaomei requested with a smile. "Then why don't you reserve the venue?" The administrator looked left and right, then quickly reached out and took the money. She gave him too much. In fact, there is no risk in such a relatively reasonable request. Even if you only give a few hundred yuan, you will usually agree. If we book the venue, no one will see Our Lady's cuteness, and she won't be able to show off that she is a child accompanied by her parents, Jin Xiaomei explained. The administrator nodded as if he understood. Anyway, it was all kinds of bad habits that come from being rich. Welcome to click on the group link in the author's words and let's all bleed together. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Ru Siahua. Chapter 1043. The bread man responsible for disinfecting was in the front, and Senmi's family was in the back. In such a cold weather, the three soft-looking sheep gave people a quite warm feeling. Especially their ears and tails twitch and sway from time to time, making people feel like they are an extremely cute family when they are among the crowd. The family atmosphere must be very harmonious, with a loving father and a loving daughter, a loving mother and a filial daughter. Mom, I decided to build 3 bleeding statues in the new playground of Dawang Mountain to commemorate our family activities today, Zhu Huntang said, pulling Mrs. Zuzan's sheep's tail. Yeah, Mrs. Takezan said nonchalantly. She was adjusting the angle of the selfie so that the composition would meet her requirements. Let's enlarge it 100 times according to the same proportion. Zhu Huntang raised his hand and made a gesture before deciding. According to the general design rules for civil buildings, if the building height exceeds 100 meters, whether residential or other public buildings are super high-rise buildings, approval will be more troublesome. I suggest that if you really want to build, keep it below 100 meters, Mrs. Takezan thought. After thinking about it, he said. Okay, Zhu Huntang nodded. 3 measles that were almost 100 meters tall were standing next to the amusement park. It wasn't bad when you think about it. If they were really close to 200 meters away, they might have a bit of a phobia of giant objects. Ordinary buildings are okay, but the animal shapes may give people the feeling of being invaded by titan creatures, full of evil charm, and are not cute anymore. Are you just doting on her like this? Lu Jianxi said in surprise. He thought Mrs. Zuzan would not agree. I remember Zhu Huntang said that her plan to build a forest park inside Bailong Center was rejected by Mrs. Zuzan, saying it was because of bad feng shui. It seems that she really felt that feng shui was not good, so she didn't allow Zhu Huntang to do whatever she wanted. If it doesn't affect feng shui, I'll probably just follow Zhu Huntang's wishes. Originally a remnant of the old feudal society, and having lived in Taiwan where the dregs of traditional culture are concentrated for many years, it is normal to care about feng shui. Ahem, by the way, when I came back from the airport, I met a truck transporting some sort of balloon. It was said to be a balloon customized by you. What are you doing? Mrs. Takezan asked quickly to express her feelings. Zhu Huntang is still very meticulous and strict in his management. It's a lamp-shaped balloon that hangs on the roof of a building and flies around. It can radiate over half of the county's sand. When people look up, they can realize that this is a city controlled by me, Zhu Huntang explained patiently. Maybe this is how parents show their authority and control over small things involving $10 or $8. I don't think Beam can control a city, but you must be controlled by Beam. Lu Jianxi shook his head. BAA. BAA. BAA, Zhu Huntang shouted loudly, quickly revealing that he was indeed controlled by BAA. Lu Jianxi's emotions were ups and downs. He felt that the sheep's ears and tail controlled by the emotion sensing system were shaking, and he quickly controlled his emotions. Zhu Huntang stood on tiptoe and looked at the carousel in front of him. These horses are running all the time. Can you count how many horses there are? Horses are not pieces, they are pieces. Zhu Huntang is a good horseman, so it is impossible not to know that horses are pieces, but Lu Jianxi couldn't help but correct her. When riding horses at Nanshan Ranch, she knew that the horses were one by one. You also know that I have done in-depth research on the history of the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period. I am familiar with many celebrities of that era, Zhu Huntang said disapprovingly. She could even name the names of the 4 princes of the Warring States period. Everything is familiar. Huh, is this a blunt change of subject? Lu Jianxi couldn't help laughing. Yes, you are very familiar with Jing Ke and Prince Dan. At your suggestion, Jing Ke stabbed Prince Dan 3 times, and Qin Shi Huang followed your advice and established the United Nations. Did I say that Qin Shi Huang established the United Nations? But, the United Nations was only established when I was a child. You should pay more attention to the progress and changes of modern society, and don't always focus only on history, Zhu Huntang admonished. Lu Jianxi clasped his hands on his chest and looked up at the sky. To say that when she was still in MaleProtagonist's belly was considered a child, that doesn't mean she was wrong, but the key point was that her true perception was that the United Nations had only been established for more than 10 years. MaleProtagonist just found the right feeling and composition, and quickly took a photo, the mother with a faint smile, the daughter with a great look on her face, and the angry father looking at the sky. What I want to tell you is that during the spring and autumn period and the Warring States period, there was a man named Gongsun Milong, Zhu Huntang said while leaning back and squeezing into his arms. Which lunatic would call Gongsun Milong? His name is Gongsun Long. Lu Jianxi was certain that she was talking about the representative of the famous Li Jianbai sect during the Warring States period. I have done research and found out that his real name is Gongsun Milong, but he is afraid that others will laugh at him for being childish and does not dare to face his inner desire to bleed, so he declares to the outside world that his name is Gongsun Long. Zhu Huntang said about the results of his research, believe it or not. Fortunately, Gongsun Long is not me. Lu Jianxi was too lazy to argue. It was not like he was dubbed Gongsun Baa Long. As for her research, it was probably the conclusion reached by the way of thinking of a mental patient. The story of Gongsun Milong is that he rode a white horse to Qin. The people of Qin said that you are from an epidemic area and your horse cannot enter Qin because it will spread the plague. Gongsun Milong said that he was riding a white horse. The white horse is not a horse. After Zhu Huntang finished speaking, he turned to look at Lu Jianxi. This story is relatively unknown, have you never heard of it? Lu Jianxi looked at her expressionlessly. It's really unpopular, and probably even kindergarten children don't know about it. Only elementary school students can learn such historical and cultural stories. Zhu Huntang paid no attention to his expression and continued, a white horse is not a horse, which is of course sophistry. White is a color. Even if the attribute of white is removed, a horse is still a horse. But a wooden horse is different. Remove the attribute of wood. It becomes something completely different from a Trojan horse. What on earth do you want to say? Ms. Susan frowned, and then she couldn't help but look at Lu Jianxi with a smile. I like to quote scriptures when talking about things, and talk about things in random ways, which is exactly the same as you. Lu Jianxi was stunned for a moment. They were not exactly the same at all. Is this how he talks about things? Absolutely not. What I want to say is that wooden horses are not horses. So horses are naturally one by one. Trojan horses are not horses, but they can be one by one. Zhu Huntang nodded with satisfaction. His argument was well-founded and reasonable. Fully demonstrated that the bad old man has a lumpy head, and his thinking is bound by habitual cognition, and he does not know how to adapt. Then do you know that in daily life, there is a cognitive standard called convention? Convention is even higher than authoritative definition. Trojan horses come one by one, this is convention. Lu Jianxi really wanted to send her back to the Warring States period, and Gongsun Long, let's compete. Oh, it's up to you. The wooden horses are also one by one. Zhu Huntang reached out and touched Lu Jianxi's chest. While helping him calm down, he raised his head towards him with eyes that said, you are my father. What should I argue with you for, means? Lu Jianxi is not happy at all. Now he just wants to take off his sheepdoll suit and run away. How can he be so irritating to people? Look, I said it a long time ago. When she talks nonsense, I ignore her. When you argue with her, are you happy if you win? Or are you angry? If you lose, you will be even more angry. The third wife looked down at the photos on her phone while admonishing her in a gentle tone. You're right, Lu Jianxi said angrily. Shouldn't the mother be on the same side as him at this time and take turns to discipline her? Seeing Lu Jianxi's unkind expression, Mrs. Susan quickly turned away to avoid pushing his idea of she should become an Antarctic into actual action. The carousel stopped, and the previous round of tourists left. The bread man in charge of disinfection quickly came forward to clean and disinfect. Then, based on Zhu Huntang's eyes, he selected 2 wooden horses, waited for the tourists to come up, and handed the 2 wooden horses to the third party. Only then did he leave in the hands of Ms. Hejia. Zhu Huntang took Lu Jianxi's hand and sat on a wooden horse. He leaned back in his arms and held his hands around him. Zhu Huntang looked left and right proudly, confidently talking to the others. Mom and Dad looked at each other with their riding children. "Tell me, am I the cutest and happiest kid in the world?" Zhu Huntang grabbed Lu Jianxi's hands and slapped them hard, threatening him to tell the truth. "Yes, you are. Is riding a wooden horse the happiest thing?" Then Lu Jianxi could only say yes. Only then did Zhu Huntang let go of his hand, took off the hood of the doll suit, and put her head in his arms, rubbing against his neck and chin. This is typical Shangguan indolence behavior, just like cats and dogs that have nothing to do and nothing interesting but come to annoy their owners. Lu Jianxi touched her head. Life is long, but each stage of life cannot be repeated. Is it because she stubbornly maintains her innocent and childish appearance because she doesn't want to grow up without her father by her side? Thinking like this, Lu Jianxi lowered his head, knocked his chin on top of her head, and gently hugged the baby girl who would make people jump into rage, make their heart burst, and make people feel pitiful and adorable. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 1044. At one moment, Zhu Huntang leaned in Lu Chang'an's arms and acted coquettishly. At another moment, he held the ears of the merry-go-round and shouted, "Drive! Drive!" At the next moment, he undulated and imitated the deep seat, pressing waves, pushing waves, Mongolian riding techniques, etc. Wait for gestures and actions. It is obvious that Ms. Takezan has no idea about shame. As the most excited and active visitor to the carousel this round, both adults and children are paying attention to this little goat man who seems to be playing the carousel for the first time. I don't know. I thought she was so excited because she had just become the first Star Destroyer pilot in human history. Mrs. Susan's pony is right next to her, and she wants to pretend that she doesn't know Zhu Huntang, but who asked her to wear a sheep doll costume? People will know at a glance that you are the same sheep. Professor Lu Jianxi usually doesn't care about the looks of passers-by, but he is a normal person after all. No matter how strong his mood is, he still knows shame and embarrassment, so he can only raise his hand to scratch his forehead from time to time, wipe his eyebrows with his fingers, and do some face-covering movements. The merry-go-round finally stopped, and Lu Jianxi quickly pulled Zhu Huntang away, who was still standing on the foot of the merry-go-round and refused to get off. Ms. Takezan followed behind and continued to use her mobile phone to take short videos of the daily interaction between father and daughter. This was also Zhu Huntang's advice to her. Haven't you seen that there are always some scenes on TV where you flip through photo albums to add warmth, memories, and emotions? Take more photos and record more, and then bring Lu Jianxi together to reminisce, which invisibly consolidates the feeling of I am your wife, this is your daughter, and we are a family of 3. She also had to admit that Zhu Huntang had a lot of small ideas in these areas, which always made Ms. Zhu-san nod and accept them. Mom, did you think of an idiom just now? Zhu Huntang turned back to test Ms. Zhu-san. Dr. Xiaoyang, Ms. Zuzan said after thinking for a while. Lu Jianxi also thought for a while and then nodded. Dr. Thin Sheep? Can a sheep also become a doctor? Sure enough, this is the BB universe, and BB can do anything. Since you can be a doctor today and an academician the next day, it is entirely possible, so I don't think it is. I need Yan Qingcheng to make up lessons for me, and sooner or later I will become Dr. Yang, who is so much better than the so-called college students. Zhu Huntang couldn't accept it. He was Dr. Yang, How could he let a college student give him tutoring lessons? Woolen cloth? Mrs. Susan rolled her eyes at her and, as usual, did not comment on her illiterate remarks. She felt that Lu Jianxi would definitely correct her very actively. Of course Lu Jianxi couldn't bear it. Dr. Slim Sheep is an idiom. It refers to a person who can restrain himself and be humble. Just now, in the state of your mentally ill sheep, we restrained our emotions very well, so when I asked if there was an idiom that came to mind, your mother thought of the sheep-related idiom Dr. Xiaoyang. Let me explain to you again, she just thought of this idiom, not that this idiom perfectly explained the scene. That's it? The idiom I thought of was Shakema. Zhu Huntang nodded to show that he had gained some knowledge, and then gave his answer. What kind of idiom is Shakema? Because I was riding a sheep just now, I thought of Shakema. Zhu Huntang laughed. I think you are a fool to ride a horse. Don't curse. Mai is so cute and not stupid at all. MRS. thought for a while and deleted the video she had just taken that might have side effects. After satisfying Zhu Huntang's wish to play the carousel, he came to watch the show. A group of dancers from Eastern Europe or possibly Russia, with tall noses and deep eyes, were performing. Everyone was sitting at the dining table in the square, eating and watching the show. Only Zhu Huntang ran directly to the front to watch. After the bread man cleaned a dining table, Lu Jianxi and Mrs. Susan sat down. Is she really only 3 years old? She is just well developed and looks like an adult, Lu Jianxi asked a little doubtfully. Anyway, he didn't know the existence of Zhu Huntang 3 years ago. Anything is possible. It seems that her words and deeds have made you doubt life. Mrs. Susan smiled slightly. Seeing a few children running over to watch the performance with Zhu Huntang, Lu Jianxi sighed and asked, how will the situation be in Antarctica when you come back? Mrs. Karnstein was originally a partner. After she recovers, she can also take charge of the scientific research work there. After all, she is also a veteran member of the Royal Society and has always kept pace with the times. As for the bear, that is, Aurora, I am only keen on watching The Legend of White Snake with that snake, Mrs. Takezan said simply. It's tasteful, Lu Jianxi nodded. He came in a hurry last time and left in a hurry. He still wanted to go to Antarctica again when he had time. There are currently 2 key projects at the Hunan University base, and Zhu Huntang is following up on them. What do you think? Mrs. Susan asked. 2 key projects? One of them is the virtual world. What is Zhu Huntang called follow-up? She asked people to change the setting of that world so that when everyone says a word, a little girl who likes to warm up will spit out from his mouth. Lamb. Lu Jianxi didn't know why at first. What is the setting of the little lamb that likes to roast in the fire? It wasn't until he later saw the pet lamb Zhu Huntang was holding, with its ears scorched yellow, that he realized that it actually had a real prototype. Mrs. Susan frowned. It seemed that Zhongqing was not good at reporting everything, and there was indeed nothing to report. Such a trivial matter, only this father would do such messy things to his daughter. Take it seriously and like to haggle over every detail. He is really free and has the time to keep an eye on Zhu Huntang. If Mrs. Zhu-san is like him and takes care of all the big and small things about Zhu Huntang, she won't have to deal with other affairs. She just finds it interesting. Strong curiosity, wild imagination, and a way of thinking that is not bound by normalcy are the basis for becoming outstanding talents. If our children are cautious and well-behaved, they will be mediocre. People are disappointed, Mrs. Susan said disapprovingly. After hearing the dragons roar in Antarctica, her resentment like an abandoned wife dissipated a lot. She also knew that her attitude towards him would have to change in the future, but after all, she was not the kind of person who had no opinion and only knew you call the shots and listen to you. The little lady who owns the rice noodle shop is a single mother. When it comes to educating her children, Mrs. Takezan has her own ideas. What she said made sense, but every time he thought about her confusing historical and cultural knowledge, the various fallacies she made based on it, and her unacceptable behavior, Lu Jianxi still couldn't agree that Zhu Huntang was just because of exuberant curiosity and unbridled imagination. Imagination, a way of thinking that is not bound by normalcy, made him feel that he would not have the courage to die if he didn't beat her. Just thinking about the ears and tails on his head and buttocks that would tremble and sway due to sensing emotions, Lu Jianxi had to control his emotions. Thinking back to the way Zhu Huntang was leaning in her arms just now, the corners of his mouth turned up involuntarily, and he walked towards the stage again. I glanced in the direction, and immediately drove away the warmth in my heart, this cheating shabby cotton-padded jacket. Zhu Huntang was holding some money in his hand and was talking to the entertainers. At this time, Lu Yuang, who was supposed to be playing exciting programs such as Big Pendulum to the Sky, Leaping into the Sky, and Flying Chair in Space, appeared unexpectedly in the tourist leisure square. Lu Jianxi then saw Lu Yuang chatting with Zhu Huntang in surprise. Zhu Huntang pointed out the exact location of Lu Jianxi and Mrs. Zhu San. Lu Jianxi's ears hidden under the sheep's hood heard Zhu Huntang say, "Lu Jianxi is over there, wait for the next pill." She only said that he was there, but didn't say that her mother was there. It must be intentional. Lu Yuang walked over here. "Hey, it's the eternal white rose and the cinnabar mole." Mrs. Zuzan saw the graceful Lu Yuang at a glance. Eternal white roses and cinnabar moles are the image symbols of Lu Yuang in the hearts of many middle-aged and elderly men. Every man who can't love her will, as he grows older, go on blind dates, fall in love, get married, have children, and become bald. How could he ever completely forget her beauty? As a young girl, Lu Yuang always wore the long skirt that was the symbol of the literary youth of that era, with long hair shawl, and held the works of the four princes Wanqiuazhan, Zhaodong, Deng Hao, and Hongzhu in her hand. Her fresh with a somewhat confused look in his eyes, he is exactly the kind of temperament that resonates emotionally with the popular sad young people. Today's Lu Yuang is elegant and mature. Time seems to have not left any traces of destruction on her body, but rather has given her the charm that has settled down. She has unique and suitable clothes, restrained but still bright eyes, swaying her beautiful figure, she walks in strides, making those men often wonder whether they have never had youth, whether they have never had true love. From the moment they know that they can't get her, they have already can we only accept a mediocre and boring life. The first time I saw her, I thought there was something wrong with her. Mrs. Zuzan stared coldly at the woman who seemed to be favored by God. She was so ordinary, but she was favored by God. Lu Jianxi didn't answer Mrs. Zuzan's words. He just sat there calmly. He didn't want to see Lu Yuang here, but what if he did? Does he still want to be secretive and hide? Lu Yuang had already walked to the table, and she didn't pay much attention to Mrs. Zuzan. Even a woman with such a strong aura as Mrs. Zuzan, after putting on a sheep doll costume, looks like an immortal cultivator whose aura has been suppressed. No matter you were once a Mahayana in the spiritual world or a saint in the demon world, you still look like a fool. The chi refining period is new. Is that Professor Lu? Lu Yuang bent down to observe, with a playful smile on his face. The last time he followed him, he was wearing high-end fashion and leather shoes. The old man's elegance and connotation accumulated over the years were revealed in his conversation. The vicissitudes of life are like a collection of Song Dynasty boundary paintings, which are worthy of careful appreciation millimeter by millimeter with a magnifying glass. But now the person wearing the sheep doll suit is also Professor Lu? No, I am not. You are, take your hands away. Go away. What are you blocking? Isn't this cute? What's there to be ashamed of? No, I'm not cute, and I don't feel ashamed. I want to take a picture and send it to my grandpa. Professor Lu Jianxi was considered to be well maintained at his age, but he was indeed a veteran. He met Lu Yuang's grandpa at a young age. We competed for the academician spot, and even earlier we competed for the little widow's ass. Of course, The winner in the end was Professor Lu Jianxi. Now Lu Yuwang takes a photo of Professor Lu Jianxi looking like an old naughty boy and shows it to his grandfather. He will definitely be able to smile and the grudges from back then will disappear. Don't shoot, you are invading privacy. Lu Jianxi avoided the camera. What Lu Yuwang said was simply like Zhu Huntang's temperament. Hey, these ears and tail are shaking so happily, so cute. Lu Yuwang wanted to take a video, so he reached out to touch the sheep's ears that were shaking at high speed. It was difficult for Lu Jianxi to adjust his emotions in the face of social death, so he had to turn his back to Lu Yuwang, while holding down the trembling sheep's ears and tail that were extremely cheerful. You don't touch me, Ms. Susan couldn't bear it. She just ignored her and went to touch her. Can sheep ears be touched casually? That's called caressing. She looked cute and couldn't bear to touch her, but when Lu Yu looked up, she started to touch her. Lu Yuwang then turned around, glanced at Ms. Susan, and looked her up and down. Excuse me, who are you? Professor Lu is worthy of being a famous person in the world. He knows countless people, so naturally he doesn't remember me. Your father and I met once when he was still working at Hunan University. You were also present at that time. Do you have any impressions? Ms. Susan picked it up. After taking off the hood of the doll costume, she didn't want to be like the person opposite, with the ears on her head trembling like dragonfly wings. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 1045. Only then did Lu Yuwang look at the woman in front of him again. I originally felt quite young, and the innocent and childish clothes always made me look younger than my actual age. After taking off the hood, some traces of time were revealed. It's not that her skin is bad or she doesn't take good care of herself, but it's that the feeling that her soul is no longer that of an 18-year-old girl can't help but escape from her eyes and temperament. This is completely different from Lu Yuwang himself. Lu Yuwang feels that it is because there is a girl who is always 18 years old in his heart, so he feels quite young to others. The other person looks more like a single mother whose daughter has excellent grades, but her family situation is not good. She is forced to choose holidays after work and wear heavy and ridiculous doll clothes to work part-time. Putting aside these immediate impressions, many pictures came to mind. In the end, Lu Yuwang recalled some slightly vague scenes. The woman in front of her had indeed given her a stunning feeling. Aunt Zhu, Lu Yuwang finally remembered, raised his hand to cover his mouth, and took a step back in surprise. Aunt Zhu, Ms. Zhu-san's surname is not actually Zhu, but that doesn't matter. Lu Yuwang actually called her aunt? Ha, I'm sorry. You are indeed taking good care of yourself. It's just that when I first met you, my father asked me to call you aunt. 20 years have passed and I can't call you sister or something like that, which will demote you. Yes, Lu Yuwang explained politely. In fact, Lu Yuwang was also a little shocked. The woman in front of her seemed to be the same as before. After so many years, the impact of time condensing even made the scene when they first met her clearer. Lu Yuwang felt that she was already a permanent representative of youth, but she had to admit that there was a slight difference between herself and when she was 18 years old. The woman in front of her was not even that different from when she was 18 years old. Of course, now that she has begun to admit that she is slightly different from when she was 18, it is also related to Lu Chang'an. This man always reminds her that she is in her 30s and her 18-year-old daughter's skin is even better good. The difference between her and An Nuan's skin is because she is in her late 30s. Thinking of this, Lu Yuwang glared at Professor Lu Jianxi next to him with some resentment. Don't call me aunt. My daughter is the same age as your daughter. We should be considered peers after all. Ms. Susan also glanced at Professor Lu Jianxi next to her with a slightly guilty look, but considering that Lu Chang'an often called himself at 18 or 19 years old, it's okay to insist on the persona of a middle-aged woman. Ah, this is fine. Lu Yuwang nodded reluctantly. Mrs. Susan is so angry. Looking at her reluctance, she seems to have concluded that Mrs. Susan must be an old woman, and she is still an 18-year-old girl. But you have taken good care of yourself. You must have been in your 30s when you became pregnant with Zhu Huntang. Now you look like an average person in their 30s, Lu Yuwang said with some envy. If I were only now when I was pregnant with An Nuan, I couldn't imagine that I would still have such skin 20 years later. This sounds like a compliment, but it is uncomfortable to the ears. What does average people in their 30s mean? There is a big difference between the upper limit and the lower limit. Some people still look girly in their 30s, while others may look like they are in their 50s or 60s. You will be like your mother 20 years from now, won't you? Your parents have taken good care of themselves, right? Mrs. Susan said calmly. Only by depicting Lu Yuwang with an image with actual reference can we bring a real sense of fear to this kind of woman. Lu Yuwang's eyelids twitched, she couldn't help but squeeze the bag in her hand, and hurriedly looked at the tender skin of her arms, which slightly dispelled the fear that aging would come sooner or later. Lu Yuwang's mother, An Nuan's grandmother, is in her 50s and has the same level of care as Zhao Yazi did when she was the same age. She looks like she is only in her 40s. However, there is still a big gap between Lu Yuwang and Lu Yuwang now, so Lu Yuwang finds it a bit difficult to accept it. The more beautiful a woman is, the more she dare not imagine wrinkles covering her body and the desolation of beauty in her old age. How do you know that my parents take good care of themselves? Lu Yuwang asked a little uncomfortably. In her impression, except for distant memories, her family had no contact with Mrs. Zhu San. Even after she met Zhu Huntang, none of them connected Zhu Huntang with Aunt Zhu. Your father had already started to switch from research and teaching to administrative work. I had a project to cooperate with Hunan University. Originally, I didn't need to interview your father in person, but, in short, during the contact process, I gave some three-dimensional items as a gift. Zuzan oral liquid, Chinese turtle essence, King of Hearts and other health products. I guess they may have very good effects after taking them. Mrs. Zuzan perfunctorily said it with some sincerity. She mentioned 3 healthcare products with a sense of the times in one breath, and she put a lot of thought into them. So that's it, I thought it was genetic inheritance from generation to generation. The confusion that had troubled Lu Yuwang for many years was solved. Occasionally she would think about why her family was always so outstanding in appearance. Group. She believed it. Mrs. Takezan was shocked. Mrs. Zuzan couldn't help but glance at Lu Jianxi to see if he was as shocked as she was. In the end, he still just turned his head and looked at the sky. It seemed that as long as Lu Yuwang didn't talk to him and didn't force him to admit that it was Lu Jianxi, he had nothing to do with it. His attitude was naturally because he knew Lu Yuwang well enough, so he didn't react much. Sure enough, my guess back then was somewhat correct. Yechanayu used to be a handsome young man in Old Sh at that time. There were feasting dance halls and social venues. Among all the famous singing and dancing prostitutes, who didn't have some flirtations with him, Yechanayu? If he hangs out on a university campus and becomes a domineering young man, he will definitely hang out with the school beauties. Aren't Lu Yuwang and Yan Hui the most outstanding campus beauties of Hunan University in that era? Unfortunately, I was constrained by my normal thinking at that time and only paid attention to the more prominent and well-known literary and artistic youths in Lushan. I saw the name Lu Jianxi full of socialist temperament several times, but turned a blind eye. There is no need to mention the past. Mrs. Zuzan looked at Lu Yuwang. Tesla did some experiments with Lu Yuwang back then. Mrs. Zuzan secretly compensated for the aftermath. The health products given to Lu Yuwang's parents were of course not Chinese turtle essence. The King of Hearts and the God of Ant Power, these crappy things. Thank you very much. The healthcare products you sent are probably not sold on the market. If it weren't for you, where would ordinary people like us get such effective healthcare products? There are no such channels and resources, Lu Yuang said sincerely. She said that as a daughter, she is also very happy that her parents can take good care of her. You're welcome. Your grandfather is an academician, your father is also a mid-level coder, and you are a full-time professor at a young age. What kind of ordinary person do you think you are? Ms. Susan thought about it for a while, but she didn't think Lu Yuang was hypocritical. This status positioning was all relative. For example, in front of Professor Lu Jianxi, wasn't she just a little woman? What a coincidence. Lu Yuang put the bag beside him and looked left and right with some emotion. I didn't expect that the three of us who may seem to be strangers actually have some intertwined stories back then. Oh, what are the stories? Ms. Susan's heart moved, and she couldn't help but glare at Professor Lu Jianxi opposite. Sure enough, he had stories everywhere. Lu Jianxi felt that although the sky today was gloomy, the gray revealed a distant loneliness, and the edges of the distant clouds exuded white light. It was a weather that hermits liked to drink and fish in. It was neither sunny nor warm. Not lukewarm, just like a leisurely and ordinary life. Intoxicated with this feeling, he had forgotten whether it was Lu Yuang's tone trying to stir up trouble or Ms. Susan's eyes. Let's talk from far away. My grandfather's name is Lu Yeheng. He is actually much older than Professor Lu Jianxi, but he was an older unmarried young man when he went to the countryside. My grandfather and Professor Lu Jianxi lived in the same hometown. My eldest son died young, leaving behind a fair-skinned and beautiful girl in the family. Lu Yuang said here, and suddenly paused. I'm sorry, Lao Ling went to the bathroom. Why did it take so long? I went to find mine. Get off her. After saying that, Lu Yuang stood up with his bag and walked away with swaying waist. Hey, this person. Ms. Susan grabbed the soft sheep doll costume. Where can someone gossip and just talk about the three elements of time, place, and character? At least there should be a plot, a beginning of events, so that people can analyze and speculate on the ending. What's going to happen next? Tell me. Ms. Susan sat anxiously on the same side as Professor Lu Jianxi, urging him to finish. You are not an ordinary person. Lu Yuang is obviously here to cause trouble, so you fell into the trap. Lu Jianxi shook his head. If Ms. Susan is also a good person, how could she fall for Lu Yuang's stupid tricks? This is probably because caring leads to chaos. She seems to have changed a bit, and she has a gentle and submissive attitude toward Lu Jianxi, but in fact she is still the rich young lady who is prone to jealousy. When she hears about the romantic affairs related to him, it is easy to lose sense of proportion. Ms. Susan came back to her senses slightly. I don't care about her, I just want to hear your story about that year. I don't care, and I don't want to care about anything. I just like to listen to you spend a long time alone like I did back then. As time goes by little happens. After saying that, Ms. Susan used her fingers to push away the messed up hair when she was wearing a hood. Her peach blossom eyes were filled with water and a light light. There was a vague charm that seemed to be intentional or unintentional, and there was a slight smile on her lips and tongue. After opening it, she turned her head and looked at the distance casually, as if she was deliberately tempting her, and it seemed that it was just her original style. Don't forget that you are wearing a sheep doll costume now. Lu Jianxi couldn't help but laugh out loud. She probably forgot that she was not wearing something charming and suitable for showing off her feminine charm. Ms. Susan suddenly felt a little embarrassed and simply turned her head and stared angrily at her little mutton skewer who was handing out money to the entertainers. Lu Jianxi refused to talk, so he didn't need to worry. He would stay in Junxia for a long time. Lu Yuang was now Zhu Huntang's tutor, so he had many opportunities to contact him in private. Without his influence, Lu Yuang, it's not just that I can manipulate him casually, and I have to tell all the stories and gossips. Lu Yuang guessed that I was Lu Chang'an, but she had no evidence. She came here just now, probably to test the relationship between me and you, and Zhu Huntang, but she gave up again for some reason. Lu Jianxi stood up. Let's go. Lu Jianxi walked over and grabbed Zhu Huntang, who was receiving support and cheers from the entertainers after giving out the money. What are you doing? Lu Jianxi asked. Don't you know? In ancient times, people performed on the streets. Those who were rich would support a show for money, and those who had no money would support a solo show. Of course I am rich, so I offered a show for money. At the same time, I asked them to take turns singing and dancing today. 3 auspicious treasures, 3 little bears, and don't look, I'm just a sheep. Zhu Huntang waved his hand and signaled for the entertainers to continue singing, and then followed Lu Jianxi away. You're so boring. Don't you know that music has a very strong psychological suggestion effect? When the cycle of songs reaches a certain level, it will have a very strong suggestion for you. As long as you hear these songs, you will recall the time we spent today. I have lived a good time, and I willingly feel that as long as Maya is happy, she will be obedient to me, completely controlled by me, and become my walking zombie. Zhu Huntang sighed with some pity, and the cycle just started. He had not heard it many times before he was about to leave, causing Zhu Huntang's plan to be temporarily aborted. How can a daughter think about controlling her father all day long? Lu Chang'an put his hand into the hood of her sheep doll costume and pulled her ears and asked. Who told you not only to love my daughter, but to think about loving others all day long, to buy canned lychees, cosmetics, and skincare products for others? Zhu Huntang snorted and crossed his arms. Unless you take the Kyushu Fenglai Jianmen, if you pass the position of sect leader to me, I will believe that you love me the most and will no longer use my ingenuity and charisma to control you like a walking zombie. Use your resourcefulness and charisma on your mother first to see if it has any effect. You don't think that if it doesn't work on her, it might work on me? Lu Chang'an said angrily, letting go of her at the same time. The lamb's ears were so crisp and tender that they felt like they would be crushed by him if he pinched them for a long time. How do you know I'm not using it? How do you know if it's effective? Zhu Huntang chuckled. At present, my mother has accepted the concept that she is from Antarctica, and at the same time, she has gradually accepted that I am the one who can cause trouble in the harem. The indispensable think tank. If things go on like this, sooner or later, I will be able to do whatever I want, and gradually become the banner of our bamboo system in the harem. When the time comes, I wave my hand, and Nanjiren, Huiwai, Zhongqing, and others will come up and give you the 3 heroes battle of Chang'an. It makes you fascinated and confused, and I took advantage of it. Take the opportunity, I'll let you take the opportunity. Lu Jianxi raised his hand and gave her a bunch of chestnuts. It was like a sheep's mouth, and he couldn't even utter a human word. I know how to fight all day long. Zhu Huntang held his head and followed Lu Jianxi. After punching and kicking him, he jumped behind him, held his neck and opened his mouth to bite his hood, letting him know that he was in a hurry. It bites? Lu Jianxi sighed and held her buttocks with his backhand to prevent her from going too crazy and falling to the ground. Mrs. Zuzan and Zhongqing were already walking in front, Zhang Xinhan was slightly behind, and Jin Xiaomei was looking at the overall situation, paying attention to Zhu Huntang, and directing the breadman to follow suit. Lu Yuwang, she and him, when he was Lu Chang'an, did he have any ambiguity with Lu Yuwang? Ms. Takezan asked calmly. Although she had just shown that she was eager to gossip about what happened in the mountains and villages when Lu Jianxi and Lu Yeheng went to the countryside, what she really realized was that if Lu Yuwang had not had any tacit understanding or ambiguity with Lu Chang'an, Lu Yuwang's attitude towards Lu Jianxi today would not be the same. His attitude would not be so casual and teasing, nor should Lu Jianxi be so evasive. Otherwise, Lu Jianxi was just an acquaintance of Lu Yeheng back then. To Lu Yuwang, he was an elder who must be respected or faced as a junior. But just when Lu Yuwang came up, he pulled Lu Jianxi. Is this his attitude towards the elders? Lu Jianxi also said that Lu Yuwang might have guessed that he was Lu Chang'an, but there was no evidence. How did you guess that? Was it because there was too much contact between the two that Lu Yuwang discovered something suspicious? Having too much contact with people like Lu Jianxi, a woman like Lu Yuwang, who is in the mood of three people spending the same day together, will inevitably fall into ambiguity with him. Zhongqing fell into deep thought. He took out his mobile phone to check the logs and looked through some screenshots of the monitoring archive nodes. Is there something going on? Ms. Susan was very familiar with Zhongqing, and when she saw her expression, she felt that something must be up. For a period of time last year, Professor Lu and her best friend Professor Ling stayed at the hotel in Beilong Center. Lu Chang'an's ID was used to book the room, and Lu Chang'an also brought two beautiful professors to borrow the swimming pool on the top floor. Zhongqing tried his best to describe the facts objectively without adding any ambiguous tone or winking expressions. Ms. Susan couldn't help but have a similar memory emerge in her mind. Although it was an accident, the picture was extremely clear, especially the little fox who had her waist broken. He is 3, 3, 3. Ms. Susan couldn't say it. It was so confusing. It was hard to imagine that Professor Lu, whom she had just met, was such a fun-loving and shameless woman. No, 2 men and 1 woman are called 3. 1 man and 2 women are usually called double takeoff. Zhongqing corrected Ms. Susan. Ms. Susan pressed her forehead, although there was nothing new about it. He might have done this kind of thing countless times in his long life, and maybe it was even a relatively unremarkable experience. Judging from his past experience as an emperor, what does it mean to enjoy all the Viang flowers in one day? Besides, others don't know, it's not like she hasn't seen his transformation before. What is the dragon nature? Although there is suspicion, I don't think he really did anything. Maybe he just rented a room. Zhongqing was not as sure as Ms. Susan that something indescribable must have happened to those 3 people. PGMMP. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 1046. Ms. Susan knows and trusts Zhongqing very well, but sometimes Zhongqing's vision is a little strange. For example, when Zhongqing discovered that Zhu Huntang had frequent contact with Lu Chang'an, he reported to Ms. Susan that she suspected that Lu Chang'an was a social idler who lived with the old madam. This is a bit too outrageous. So in her eyes, 3 people renting a room ran counter to the conclusion of normal analysis, and it may not mean that she had made any unique discoveries. It's just a matter of vision. Take Ms. Susan herself as an example. Even if she is just a woman from an ordinary family, she would never let a man with whom she has no romantic relationship open a room for her, unless it is for business reception or something. Last year, it was after you showed me the truth about this world that I was greatly shocked, and then I went to eat barbecue and drink with Lu Chang'an. I was drunk that night, and it was he who sent me back to the hotel. Zhongqing's mission it is to provide Ms. Susan with effective and correct information, rather than doing everything to cause trouble like Zhu Huntang, so even if it is an unspeakable shame, it must be reported truthfully. It seems that he is very skilled in opening rooms, Ms. Susan said calmly. Ah. No, that's my long private room in the hotel. He didn't take me to another hotel to book a room. Zhongqing quickly corrected him. Then what? A spring breeze kills you. That's not true. Zhongqing gritted his teeth, raised his right hand to hold his left cheek, and then slid it to his neck. It seemed that there was still a dull pain there. I drank a little too much, and I seemed to throw myself into his arms. He slapped me. Passed out. Ms. Susan's lips were closed together like red cherry lips about to bloom. She pressed her cheeks with her tender fingertips and finally suppressed her smile. This seemed like something he would do. Zhongqing's teeth were itching. This was one of the reasons why she bought clothes suitable for outdoor activities online and took photos, but did not send them to her godfather. She still feels extremely humiliated when she thinks about it. If the other party was not the third wife, Zhongqing would never mention this matter to anyone again. Bai Hui only found out about this matter when she bumped into him. Zhongqing's impulse to kill someone and silence them was just an impulse and he did not act on it. Practice. Then why do they rent a room? If it's just for 1 or 2 days, or just by chance, if they stay in a private room in a hotel for a long time, there must be some special reason. Mrs. Takezan thought. It will never be a landlord fight. You speak so casually now. Did you learn from him? Sorry. Zhongqing smiled and nodded. Actually, there are not always 3 of them. Among them, Lu Chang'an's girlfriend and Nuan and my cousin Bai Hui have both been in and out of that room. Go back and ask the people at the hotel to see if there are any clues. A woman like Lu Yuang will definitely be impressed by her after seeing her a few times. I guess it's not a scene of being turned into a red wave and a continuous spring rain. Zhu, the third wife, was relieved, but she was a little concerned after all. Good. At this time, Zhu Huntang was being carried by Professor Lu Jianxi, looking left and right, and followed him with great authority. Other children are envious of me, Zhu Huntang said arrogantly to Mrs. Susan. Yes, yes. Come down. Lu Jianxi didn't want to carry her on his back anymore. She just met a father and son, and she actually mocked the child for not having a father on his back. The child started to make a fuss. Fortunately, Lu Jianxi looked like a middle-aged and elderly man, but he was tall and strong. Next to him was a bluffing baker in a black suit. The young father bulged his eyes twice and decided to endure it instead of talking to Mr. Zhu. Tang cared about it and had to move forward with the weight. You carry me to the bumper cars. The previous item is called the donut bumper car. Each car is limited to 2 people. The weight of a single person does not exceed 85 kilograms, and the weight of a double person does not exceed 150 kilograms. Therefore, if many friends go to the amusement park and want to have a sweet 2-person ride with their girlfriends or dates, they must pay attention to your weight, otherwise you will have to watch your girlfriend bumping into other people outside, and you will not know what sparks will come out of the collision. Jin Xiaomei still made arrangements in advance, and the bread man followed up with the disinfecting. Let's sit in the same car. Zhu Huntang shook one of Lu Jianxi's thumbs. You secretly used some tricks to create the effect of us running rampant and knocking everyone else away. Are you here to have fun, or are you here to cause chaos? Or do you think your amusement park will open next year and now it will cause some trouble for your competitors? She really doesn't do anything humane. Would I use such low-level means to compete in business? What's more, running an amusement park is naturally the management's business. If I still need to personally take action to compete with an amusement park that has been open for 20 years, then they will give it to me. Go eat the sheep dung balls, Zhu Huntang said disdainfully. I finally said something humane. The threshold continued to decrease. As long as she spoke normally, Lu Jianxi felt that he could nod and praise her. I am actually a genius in business management. In ancient times, I was at least at the level of Fan Chong. I could influence the current affairs of the country, participate in the formulation of the plan to destroy the country, and finally steal the wife of the spring and autumn overlord and run away, Zhu Huntang said. After finishing, he made a heart shape with his hands and stamped it on Lu Jianxi's forehead. My name is Fan Li. Scholars can read half of it, and illiterate people can read 1/3. Lu Jianxi thought for a moment before realizing who Fan Chong she was talking about was. Fan Chong is the nickname I gave him, just like you gave me the nickname Xian Yang. Lu Jianxi rarely regretted it at first, but now he pressed his forehead and thought hard about why he rode Zhu Huntang to fly under the moonlight that night and talk to her about immortals and mounts. Why are you pressing my chest? Lu Jianxi changed the subject. Fan Chong's wife is called 11 Shi. 11 Shi has a famous idiom called 11 Zi by Xin. Just when I talked about Fan Chong and his wife, I made a gesture idiom to show that I was educated. Zhu Huntang sneered. Twice, he lowered his hands. Although he was knowledgeable and talented, his reaction was really slow, and his ability to turn his thinking was a bit weak, far inferior to that of meme. What kind of idiom is Ziza comparing one's heart to one's heart? It means Ziza praising one's heart. It makes you look literate, but you are just illiterate. Damn old man, why do you always look like you're going to get angry at any time when you're with me? What did you say? Obviously I'm very good. Stop arguing, don't you want to take the bumper car? There are few people, so there is no need to queue up MRS. Zuzan greeted the big sheep and the little sheep who were bound to make a noise within 3 minutes. Daddy, what do you think of the room at Bailong Central Hotel? Zhongqing asked in a low voice as Lu Jianxi walked over. The phrase godfather is a bit sudden, but men always feel very comfortable and special when they are called daddy and daddy. Lu Jianxi glanced at her. Today, Zhongqing was wearing decent business attire, but the charm of a mature woman made her even more attractive. The best match for the straight clothes was her exquisite and graceful body curves. Zhongqing just smiled and walked away without waiting for Lu Jianxi's answer. After all, she could only click until now, and she couldn't remind anything too obviously. Lu Jianxi also smiled. When asked how the rooms at the Bailong Center Hotel are like, naturally only those who have stayed there or booked a room there will know. Lu Chang'an, the son of Lu Jianxi, went to rent a house. The only reason Zhongqing suddenly mentioned this matter was because someone was paying attention to Lu Chang'an's apartment opening. If it was someone else's concern, Zhongqing would handle it himself without giving any implicit hints. Only MRS Zuzan could make Zhongqing dare to hint but not say it outright. Why did MRS Zuzan suddenly pay attention to Lu Chang'an's decision to open a house? Lu Chang'an went to check out the apartment with Lu Yuwang. I just happened to meet Lu Yuwang in the amusement park today. MRS Zuzan probably got some information about Lu Yuwang's past contacts with Lu Chang'an, which made Zhongqing pay more attention. Zhongqing was worried that Lu Chang'an and Lu Yuwang were going to open a house. What's going on? So I remind Father Lu to make preparations in advance if anything happens. That's what it means. If you are more straight-minded, you probably won't understand Zhongqing's hint at all. Lu Jianxi understood that he had nothing to prepare or deal with. Whether it was Lu Jianxi and Lu Yuwang, or Lu Chang'an and Lu Yuwang, they were netizens, elders and juniors, the mother of his girlfriend and the boyfriend of his daughter. Friends, that's all. The relationship is simple and clear, far less chaotic than the family under the sycamore tree. But Zhongqing is considerate after all. It would be nice to have such a goddaughter, but it's a pity that she is not very willing. Thinking of this, Lu Jianxi took another look at Zhu Huntang, who was instructing the bread man to come and play bumper cars. Our bumper car team is called Bime Team, and my bumper car is Bime No 1. Zhu Huntang pulled Lu Jianxi into one. Zhu Huntang drove the car herself. She hung the Bimea speaker in front of the bumper car, as did the other bread people. Baa. Baa Baa Baa. Ba Baa Baa Baa. The bumper cars start up. As long as the bumper cars belonging to the bleacher team collide with each other, the bleacher speakers in front of them will vibrate and bump, and they will make sheep sounds one after another. For a time, there seemed to be countless sheep fighting in the field. Some tourists were attracted by the sound of sheep and looked into the field, but did not see a single sheep. They couldn't help showing confused expressions. What impressed Lu Jianxi even more was that Zhu Huntang's breadmen were extremely dedicated when playing with their boss. As long as they were knocked down by Zhu Huntang's Bimea No. 1, they would consciously reverse the car, as if they were knocked back. They themselves were also swaying around in the bumper car, leaning forward and backward, swaying left and right, and imitating the scene of a car accident. Some even used too much force and rolled out of the car, making a desperate struggle on the ground. Zhujuntang Zi laughed arrogantly there, as if she was driving not a bumper car, but a rampaging dump truck. Lu Jianxi couldn't help but think of many monarchs in history who were famous for their stupidity, as well as those dandy sons who led to the loss of their families. Isn't this the kind of environment in which they grew up? There are always people supporting and coaxing me, it's amazing that I can mature. It would be weird if he didn't develop such a willful and self-righteous character. To educate Zhu Huntang, maybe we have to start with her group of breadmen. Lu Jianxi glanced at Gao Xiao, the leader of the breadmen, who was taking off his tie and tying it on his head, trying to express his concussion after being hit. The injured person's appearance will win the attention and admiration of the boss. Epsilon equals Omicron asterisk. After getting out of the donut bumper car, he passed by buildings that imitated St. Mark's Square, the Bell Tower and the Doge's Palace in Italy. Zhu Huntang pointed at the double-decker carousel, and was pulled by Lu Chang'an to see the hundreds of crowd sculptures that only Chu has talent receive historical and cultural education. This group of sculptures represents hundreds of outstanding talents in the history of Xiaoxiang, headed by the founding fathers of modern times. While pointing out the historical allusions and life stories of these characters to Zhu Huntang, Lu Jianxi found that Zhu Huntang really had one advantage: her historical knowledge was messy, but she was really interested in history. This is quite commendable. You must know that there are many girls like Shang Guandandan nowadays. They always think that they only need to be cute and can survive by pretending to be cute. Their minds are empty, they have no culture or common sense, and they have no sense of history. Interest, even the 10 founding marshals and the 10 generals cannot explain clearly. Because today is Qingming festival, colorful flowers are placed in front of the statues of many heroes and martyrs, expressing people's grief and remembrance. It also allows tourists to remember while feeling that a good life is hard-won, and to understand themselves better. The responsibilities we shoulder are not to forget the martyrs, carry on the legacy, and study hard. Do you know all the people here? Zhu Huntang asked, pointing to the statue. I only know a small number of them. Lu Jianxi shook his head. Life is short, and many people bloom brightly like fireworks. His life has ended before I have time to witness the radiance with my own eyes. Grandpa, every time I come to play, my dad will teach me how to identify characters. I know most of them now. If you don't know them, you can ask me. A primary school student next to him raised his head and said to Lu Jianxi. What I know and what you can recognize are not the same thing. Lu Jianxi smiled slightly. The primary school students were a little confused. Kid, my sister will make a bet with you. Zhu Huntang snapped his fingers, and the bread man brought a stack of money. If you recognize a person, I will give you 100 yuan. If you don't recognize anyone, give me 1000 yuan piece. Huh, the primary school student was ready to move in disbelief. Lu Jianxi reached out and pulled Zhu Huntang's ears and pulled her away. He would bully children all day long and provoke those children whose parents brought them out to play. Grandpa Mao, the children quickly followed and shouted a great title. Zhu Huntang endured the pain of having his ears torn, and insisted on stretching out his hand far away and handing out a red ticket to the child. The next attraction is Xiangzi Magic House. As soon as he arrived at the door, Zhu Huntang loudly ordered the bread man, next, you learn my movements. Whatever I do, you do it. After saying that, she straightened her arms and jumped in like a zombie. The bread man behind followed without hesitation, and there were also a few sheep calls mixed in. Lu Jianxi vowed that within the next 3,000 years, he and Zhu Huntang would never come to a place like the amusement park again. He fell in the last place, but Mrs. Zuzan seemed to be very interested in these things, asking Zhongqing questions, as if people from southern Hunan knew how to drive corpses and poison. In fact, people from Xiangzi had to participate in driving corpses and poisoning. Gu skill assessment. When we were at Nanshan Ranch a while ago, Lu Jianshi's son Lu Chang'an and Shang Guandandan went to the Xiangxi area and met a group of people who pretended to make jokes about exorcism but were actually selling drugs. Lu Chang'an also played the role of the zombie king until the end. After his identity was exposed, everyone knew that the zombie king was actually Lu Chang'an. He himself had been lying in a coffin, had been recognized as a zombie, and had even eaten poisonous insects. Naturally, he was not very interested in the attraction of this magic house in western Hunan. However, Zhu Huntang was very interested in pretending to be a zombie and did not bother him, so he stood there outside the door. I watched tourists renting Taoist priest uniforms and imitating Lin Zhengying's various movements and poses to take photos and play. There are also people who are interested in the Qing dynasty zombie suit. It turns out to be Lu Yuwang and Professor Ling. Just as Lu Jianxi was about to turn around, Lu Yuwang saw him and pulled Professor Ling over. "Professor Lu, you actually look cute in this outfit. Why are you hiding from me?" Lu Yuwang said with a smile, because he felt that something happened today and he felt like he had the upper hand. "The last time I met this guy, he actually let her be glued to the tatami and inserted the ablation agent into his chest. Fortunately, he was able to hold it, so the embarrassment of the ablation agent tube not rolling around on his chest was avoided." Scene. A few words of laughter at him today can relieve the hatred in my heart. A woman like herself must retaliate and appear vicious and hateful, so others don't dare to bully her casually. "Professor Lu," Professor Ling looked up and down at the handsome man in front of him. Although he was a bit older, these old men who had accumulated connotation, hidden vicissitudes of life, but were mature and elegant, were not attractive to middle-aged women of Professor Ling's age. It's inferior to having fresh meat like a dog's waist. "I'm not hiding from you, don't you think I'm standing here now," Lu Jianxi said calmly. In fact, his psychological quality has always been very thick, but because he was with Zhu Huntang, this little sheep behaved like a handful. Like a knife, it weakened his psychological quality a lot with each cut. "You look really good in this outfit. Next time I take Nuan and Lu Chang'an out to play, I will let them wear doll clothes." "You said that if I let Lu Chang'an wear doll clothes, will he wear them?" Lu Yuwang looked up at Professor Lu Jianxi. The slightly trembling sheep ears on the top of the head said. Lu Jianxi coughed lightly. His thought today was that the experience of wearing a doll costume to play in the amusement park was impressive, so don't wear it next time. But when people are alive, they need to be treated fairly. People should treat others fairly. They only wear doll clothes to play with Zhu Huntang and Zhu San's mother and daughter, but are not willing to wear doll clothes to play with Nuan and Lu Yuwang's mother and daughter. Isn't that good? Although the relationships are somewhat different, they cannot be completely used as analogies. Then you and Lu Chang'an have to talk to each other. "I can't overstep my authority." Lu Jianxi waved his hand. "This Professor Lu, let me introduce you." Professor Ling held Lu Yuwang's arm and shook it, his eyes moving. The man in front of him seemed to be exuding a mellow charm like old wine. The most important thing is to listen to the conversation. Who does he seem to be from Lu Chang'an? If it was Lu Chang'an's father, wouldn't he be the one who truly mastered the black technology of beauty and skincare? Lu Chang'an is already safe and sound. Will Lu Jianxi in front of him be without a master? Oh, this is Professor Lu Jianxi. He also worked at Hunan University and is now retired. He is Lu Chang'an's father. Lu Yuwang introduced Professor Ling seriously. This is Professor Ling Yueling. Young Ling is feeling depressed because her relationship with her estranged husband has further broken down, so I went out with her to relax. Oh, what are you talking about? Professor Ling was shy. Lu Jianxi shook hands with Professor Ling politely. Professor Ling was middle-aged and was obviously in a bad mood, but it did not affect her physiological secretion and other conditions. Her skin was getting better and better, and her palms also had the kind of texture unique to middle-aged women. Soft and gentle. Such a good situation is naturally due to her experience of eating facial cream with Lu Yuwang. Professor Lu, we are actually quite familiar with your son Lu Chang'an. Because of some things, we admire your scientific research capabilities and achievements very much, and we are astonished. Professor Ling looked at Lu Jianxi. He may be a son of old age. Although he is wearing an exaggerated doll costume, he can be seen as tall and straight, with no aging rickets on his back. Especially when you look at his neck and palms, you can tell that he may be stronger and stronger than some middle-aged men in their 40s. And vitality. At least he doesn't have a big belly, like Professor Han's, but such a doll suit can't hide it. It's just that an old man like Professor Han can have female students to play with. I don't know what Professor Liu's marital and love status is like in front of him. Thank you for the ridiculous compliment, but it's not worth mentioning. Lu Jianxi smiled and waved his hand. He felt okay about Professor Ling. She was a traditional gentlewoman who could make people talk happily, but she didn't like that kind of facial cream. He seemed to be obsessed with getting it at all costs. Whether he was looking at Lu Chang'an or Lu Jianxi, it was like looking at a piece of salivating tang monk meat. After saying that, Lu Jianxi walked to the Xiangzi magic house. Facing the two women Lu Yuwang and Professor Ling, he felt more comfortable facing the little sheep pretending to be a zombie. Lu'er, isn't this man going to do anything? Seeing Lu Jianxi's upright figure in a doll suit leaving, Professor Ling excitedly held Lu Yuwang's arm and stamped his feet. What are you going to do? Lu Yuwang frowned and looked up at Professor Ling. She had actually taken revenge on him just now. She said something very skillful and appeared to be good at calculations, which made him feel embarrassed and dealt a heavy blow. Got to him. Think about it, and Nuan is Lu Chang'an's girlfriend. How great would it be if you and Professor Lu became a couple? Professor Ling smiled brightly. Although his marriage was not very happy, he was once happy. But my best friend has never experienced the sweetness between men and women. In life, you always have to try it before you leave any regrets. Ah, Lu Yuwang had never thought about this, Lu Jianxi's true identity. Lu Yuwang suddenly turned red. How could this be possible? Don't forget, Lu Chang'an has those things in his hands, let alone Professor Lu Jianxi. Maybe the technology and products in his hands can have no side effects and will not make our cell activity too strong. Professor Ling, I have a lot of psychological shadow about the hard work and hardships of being specially trained by Lu Chang'an last year. Of course, compared with the temptation of beauty, the pain and cost are nothing. So that's what you're after, Lu Yuwang understood. Professor Ling probably thought Lu Chang'an was a bit difficult to deal with, so it would be better to deal with Professor Lu Jianxi. It's not all. Don't you think that Professor Lu Jianxi is really charming and seems to be a good match for you? Professor Ling felt a little emotional. He has seen too many men and women who covet Lu Yuwang over the years, but with this alone in terms of appearance, temperament and other appearance conditions, only Professor Lu Jianxi felt that she was worthy of Lu Yuwang. He. The blush on Lu Yuwang's cheeks was like a peeled red grape, moist and tender, making people salivate. She quickly found a reason to stop Professor Ling from continuing to talk about this ridiculous topic. He's too old, he's an old man. What is old? Haven't you heard an old saying, an old man can make great progress with each passing day? Professor Ling lowered his voice. The topics that middle-aged women often talk about are often more naked and unlimited than dirty girls. After all, this age group, the woman is the main force of the women's health club. How can such a thing be said? Lu Yuwang frowned, feeling that only Zhu Huntang could speak such a strange idiom. Let's just say that he is a well-maintained and strong old man. In fact, he gets stronger with time. The total mileage of his short sprint exercise is thousands of miles at a time. In other words, he can consume 1,000 calories at a time, which is very impressive. Data. Professor Ling also explained mysteriously with a shy and teasing smile. Lu Yuwang was stunned for a moment before he realized what he was saying. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. He felt that what he said was a bit excessive. He punched Professor Ling angrily and said, "If you want to be so optimistic about him, you'd better do it yourself. Anyway, as I said, it will be a matter of time before I divorce Lao Han, so it's not an exaggeration to take precautions now. I, Ling Yu, am fully worthy of others. He is unkind and unjust. I cannot be like him. If I really go through the formalities, I will do whatever I want when the time comes." Professor Ling sighed. In fact, she still felt that for Professor Lu Jianxi to be like this for men, Lu Yuwang is more stable. Such a man's requirements for a woman may be more than just a simple figure. After playing in the amusement park for a day, Professor Lu Jianxi was exhausted physically and mentally. He transformed back into Lu Chang'an's appearance, changed into human clothes, and then walked home. The streets are lively and festive, and a milk tea shop actually advertises "have a drink for it." It feels a bit baffling. Could it be that the ancient practice of substituting tea for wine refers to milk tea? It's really Zhu Huntang's cultural understanding. Lu Chang'an didn't mind his own business. He blew a stream of air across the street and the billboard fell down in an understanding manner. It probably had nothing to do with him. After today's ordeal, Lu Chang'an has made more positive and healthy arrangements for the remaining Qingming festival holiday. It seems to have rained a little in the urban area, half wet and half dry. It is still a bit far away from the atmosphere of rainfall during Qingming festival. Lu Chang'an couldn't help but think of the experience of going to the cemetery to pay homage to himself and his relatives and friends. At that time, the forests and grasses in the mountains and fields were prosperous, and many tombs without special parks were hidden in the mountains and fields. If descendants had not remembered the place from generation to generation and familiarized their descendants with the paths and locations, they would have often become forgotten. Wild grave. No one wants to be forgotten. Even if they die and turn into a bowl of loess, they often miss someone coming to see them. However, except for a very few people, there are a few people who can still enjoy the world after decades or hundreds of years. What about the fireworks ceremony? It is said that nearly 100 billion people have died since the birth of mankind. There were many people Lu Chang'an was very familiar with. He couldn't find those graves anymore, and he didn't know if there were still footprints on their graves without his patronage. He lit a few incense sticks, burned a few pieces of paper money, and hung a few strips of green. Lu Chang'an once admired a person very much. His name was Lu Heng. This man was very open-minded about life and death. He said that death was the way of nature. He was much more detached than his outstanding or mediocre colleagues. There is no trace of death in his grave. The burial objects often made Lu Chang'an feel slightly ashamed when he looked at the gold and silver jewelry in his grave and recalled Lu Heng's frugality. Breaking away from the stupid and confused mood in the amusement park, Lu Chang'an thought about the people and things related to Qingming festival and walked into the community. There are many people here who will probably be buried in the grave soon. Shang Guandandan and Zhou Dongdong were sitting under the sycamore tree. Shang Guandandan took out the small stove and lit it outside. There were huge and plump chestnuts placed on the edge of the stove. She supported her cheek with one hand and held an iron drill holding briquettes in the other hand. A chestnut is roasting. Zhou Dongdong took a pack of walnuts and was eating them. She put the walnuts on the small bench, then used a wooden board to press the walnuts, and then sat down. There was a crisp click sound, and the walnuts broke into pieces. She took the wooden board away again, picked up the walnuts and smashed them into her mouth. Li Sai, and fed some to Shang Guandandan and Lu Sin at the same time. Dogs can eat walnuts, which can make their hair shinier and softer, just don't eat too much. Lu Chang'an remembered that the supermarket he went to last time sold frozen green-skinned walnuts. He could buy some for Zhou Dongdong to eat. Raw walnuts have a different taste, and the crispy and tender ones are more delicious than dried walnuts. Looking at the chestnut shells and walnut shells around, Lu Chang'an suspected that they had been eating here for at least an hour or two. Zhou Dongdong, I wish you were so smart in your studies. Lu Chang'an expressed his appreciation for Zhou Dongdong's behavior that fully embodies the content of junior high school physics. Brother Chang'an, you're back. Zhou Dongdong sat down and waved to greet Brother Chang'an while expressing doubt, am I not smart in my studies? You are the last one, do you think you are witty or not? Lu Chang'an asked back. Witty. Regarding her unwavering self-confidence, Lu Chang'an did not try to attack her. He just shook his head and said, I hope that if you encounter difficulties in your studies in the future, you will find a way to solve them yourself. If I can learn by myself, what do schools and teachers do? Children can learn by themselves. Why does mother always ask children to go to school? Zhou Dongdong ate walnuts incomprehensibly. You'd better eat more walnuts to replenish your brain. Lu Chang'an was exhausted both physically and mentally today and didn't want to talk more. Giggle, Dongdong is so cute. Shang Guandandan yawned and then laughed. Her chestnuts were also roasted, so she blew a few breaths in front of the iron, then she held the scalding chestnuts with several layers of paper towels, and slowly rubbed off the skin, revealing the steaming heat of the roasting, and the golden chestnuts. Golden chestnut kernels. Shang Guandandan bit into half of the chestnut kernel and opened his mouth slightly because it was so hot. The tip of his tongue was beating against the half chestnut kernel in his lips. Then he pinched the remaining half kernel and asked Lu Chang'an if he wanted to eat it. I will not eat. Shang Guandandan still fed it to Zhou Dongdong, and Zhou Dongdong also took some broken walnut kernels and asked Lu Chang'an if he would eat them, and finally gave them to Shang Guandandan. Brother Chang'an is always picky about food. What should I do if I lose weight? Zhou Dongdong was a little worried. He had grown up, but there were still many things that Zhou Dongdong needed to worry about. Shang Guandandan took another chestnut and started roasting it slowly. This was a very test of patience. Only chestnuts roasted slowly over low heat are the most delicious. It took Shang Guandandan about 10 minutes to roast one. Fortunately, she neither wanted to study nor found a job, so she could only spend her time on these trivial things, slowly turning the time into years. I've lost weight, so I'll take a few bites from you, Lu Chang'an said. Zhou Dongdong looked at his hands and handed his left hand, which looked more delicious, to Lu Chang'an. Eat it? No, I'll be full after eating your hands. I won't be able to eat anything delicious tonight. There is something delicious tonight. Zhou Dongdong quickly put down the walnuts in his hand and jumped up at the same time, chanting the mantra walnuts, walnuts, hurry up and turn into poop. Lu Chang'an turned his back to them and walked out of the community, hooking his fingers. Shang Guandandan and Zhou Dongdong hurriedly trotted to follow, grabbing his fingers from left to right, looking up and asking what to eat and where to go. After eating, he reported what he did today and other topics, and walked out with him. Big chapter, various requests. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 1047. Su Mei returned to Beilong Center and did not go to Building 2. Instead, she came to the Sky Garden on the top of Building 1 and drank tea while waiting for Zhongqing. Zhang Xinhan asked someone to carry a large iron cage over and placed it next to Su Mei. The others retreated, and Zhang Xinhan stayed to wait on her. This scenery is not bad. It would be even better if there were a few snow-capped mountains in the distance. Su Mei thought of the place where the poem The Window Contains Thousands of Autumn Snows in the Xiling Mountains was left. Compared with it, Junsha has its own merits and completely different temperament, but simply speaking, the natural geographical environment is much richer over there. The nearby Imei mountain is more than 3,000 meters above sea level, and is more than 2,700 meters higher than the Imei plain. It is majestic. The first mountain here in Junsha, Foot Mountain, is only 300 meters above sea level, while Sheneng Peak, the highest peak in southern Hunan, is only over 2,000 meters above sea level. Who doesn't like to see mountains from afar? If possible, she would even want to climb. Sumei thought of Qin Yanan. When he returned to Junsha, he would definitely have more quarrels with Qin Yanan, but he did not expect that there would be a meeting like yesterday. Afterwards, Li Hongfang came to apologize tremblingly, and Sumei did not blame her. After all, Li Hongfang was once hers, and there was nothing to worry about after she apologized. However, Qin Yanan must have been so angry that she went to complain, and Li Hongfang would not apologize to her. This matter can only be said to be a combination of Li Hongfang's misunderstandings. It's a good mistake. I remember the first time I saw the snow-capped mountains, I accompanied you to the snow-capped mountains. Zhang Xinhan followed Sumei's words and said. Today, Zhongqing was basically accompanying Sumei closely, pushing Zhang Xinhan to the periphery, as if he was on the same level as Jin Xiaomei. Level. Zhang Xinhan did not mean to look down on Jin Xiaomei. In ancient times, Jin Xiaomei was a student who accompanied the prince to study. Who would dare to offend her? It's just that Jin Xiaomei's level is indeed not high. Sumei smiled lightly. The snow mountain she was talking about and the snow mountain Zhang Xinhan mentioned were actually not the same thing. The two snow mountains mentioned by Zhang Xinhan had different meanings. The second highest peak in Taiwan is called Snow Mountain. It means that some snow falls on it in winter. It is indeed very rare in subtropical areas. However, it is not the same as those snow mountains worthy of the name that can only be defined as snow mountain with snow all year round. Something happened. Just some uneducated Taiwanese people like to compete with Jade Dragon Snow Mountain for the title of the southernmost snow mountain. To be honest, I don't have the qualifications to compete. I'm talking about seeing the snow-capped mountains in Chengdu. When the weather is good, you can occasionally see Ganga Mountain, and generally you can see many 5 to 6 kilometer long snow-capped mountains. They are so majestic that the whole city is amazed. Sumei Shao, looking back at the top of Lushan Mountain, he realized that he lived higher than Qin Yanan, so he didn't know whether he was superior to the other. How about taking advantage of the cool weather and using a large amount of dry ice to cool down the top of Lushan Mountain, and then arrange a batch of snow-making machines to artificially create a snowy mountain top? If you work all night tonight, you can open the curtains tomorrow morning and you will be able to see the snowy scenery of Lushan Mountain. Zhang Xinhan suggested thoughtfully. This is all done with practical experience. Generally speaking, the beautification effect of bare stone mountains is better. Sumei was a little moved, but shook her head. Although it was a trivial matter, she would still be scolded. At present, she was purely a mother and a daughter, so it was better not to let him think that she was as willful as Zhu Huntang, so she lost the opportunity to stay in Junsha to teach. The meaning of Zhu Huntang. If Zhu Huntang let someone do this, he would probably just say a few words and not care about anything. A man is always the softest to his precious daughter. Forget it, I don't want to be scolded. Sumei took a sip of tea, her soft eyes fell on the gorgeous flowers and plants near the iron cage. This small garden was quite well organized, but the emperor flower next to it seemed to be covered by some small flowers. The animals had gnawed them to pieces. Most likely, Zhu Huntang had played here with her pets, or was it gnawed by herself? Zhang Xinhan felt a shiver in his heart. He couldn't tell anything from Sumei's tone, but was his suggestion flattering? I didn't expect that the third wife would be careful about the influence of public opinion. The environment in mainland China is indeed a little different. These days, please pay attention to observation and study. If you don't understand some things yourself, I won't tell you, Sumei said lightly. Zhang Xinhan is still worth cultivating, but he is too thoughtful in some aspects. He is not as good as Zhongqing in terms of business management and business talent. He will still be suitable to take over from Zhu Xianshu in the Zhu family in the future. He will be competent enough to be a big housekeeper or something. Yes, Zhang Xinhan quickly lowered his head and said, but he was a little confused. Is he talking about Mr. Liu? This gentleman and the third wife and the third lady seem to have some special relationship, which Zhang Xinhan has been a little confused about today. At this time Zhongqing came to the small garden with some information documents. Zhang Xinhan glanced at it and saw that there were electronic documents, printed paper documents, and some high-definition photos. You go out first. Zhongqing glanced at Zhang Xinhan and said calmly. Out of the corner of Zhang Xinhan's eyes, she noticed that Sumei was pinching a petal with her nails. The rich and fragrant juice dyed her soft white skin a yellow-orange color, but she did not show any intention of letting Zhang Xinhan stay. There was another feeling in her heart. Feeling uncomfortable, he took 2 steps back and walked out the door. Thinking back when the third wife asked one of her or Zhongqing to come to Junxia, who did Zhang Xinhan think would be willing? Of course, staying with the third wife is better than coming to Junxia. Staying in a city in the central part of the mainland is not the same as being sent to the frontier. Who knew that Zhongqing was more respected here, and now he was more able to take charge of his own affairs, and could vaguely boss Zhang Xinhan around, but others didn't think there was anything wrong. The looks and tones of people from all walks of life today showed how they treated her and Zhang Xinhan. Zhongqing, there are clearly some differences. Could it be that what the third wife just said was to point out the root cause of the gap between herself and Zhongqing? Zhang Xinhan walked to the corner and started to contact the few acquaintances here. As you said, Professor Lu left a deep impression on the hotel staff. Except for the time when Lu Chang'an booked a room for her, she also had the experience of booking a room alone twice, both late at night. Zhongqing said. The information collected from the hotel was handed over to Sumei for review. Sumei first took a look at the high-definition color-printed photos. This telephone pole seems to be Lu Chang'an's current girlfriend in Nuan. Sumei sneered. At the age of 18 or 19, the girlish purity between her eyebrows is not much, but the charming and sentimental feeling is overflowing, which is nourished by others. That's good. When Professor Lu was renting a room in the hotel, he once posted an order to invite photographers online, and the person who took the order was my cousin Bai Hui. Bai Hui went to take photos, and these are the photos. These photos are easy to find, Bai Hui putting these photos in the album where her photography works are displayed. I don't know what kind of masochistic mentality it is. But now is not the time to be concerned about the complicated and entangled mentality of the little cousin, a young girl with rebellious and masochistic emotions, who is forced to express her sorrow in order to compose new words. Professor Lu invited a photographer, but after your cousin went there, the person he photographed was in Nuan. Sumei discovered a problem that Zhongqing didn't say clearly. Right. Did you ask your cousin if she saw Lu Yuwang that day? I asked, but she didn't see Lu Yuwang. There were only an Nuan and another Professor Ling in the room. During this period, Lu Chang'an came in and out. After the filming of Bai Hui was completed, Lu Chang'an sent her away, so she remembered many details. I know. Later Lu Chang'an went to buy a camera lens. Zhongqing knew that the matter was very important, and even if she cared about her godfather, if he really cheated on Professor Lu, Zhongqing would not help him hide it from Sumei. As for the truth of the matter, it was difficult for Zhongqing to judge whether Lu Chang'an and Lu Yuwang had done anything. He still had to leave it to Sumei to analyze and make a conclusion. Sumei looked through An Nuan's photos carefully again and compared them with the appearance of Lu Yuwang she saw today. They are mother and daughter very similar. If Lu Yuwang lets his hair down or puts it in a ponytail and has bangs, wouldn't it look more alike? Sumei just asked knowingly. Of course, An Nuan now is the same as Lu Yuwang 20 years ago. They will look exactly the same. To be on the safe side, Zhongqing found a photo of Lu Yuwang and sent it to the technical bread man in charge of graphics processing in the bread man team. He processed the photo according to what Sumei just said. He quickly changed Lu Yuwang's hairstyle and sent back the photo with bangs added. Zhongqing had seen the mother and daughter many times and was a little surprised at how similar they were. After such modification, Professor Lu feels a bit pretentious, and it is difficult to suppress the charm of a mature woman, but if you don't look carefully, you may mistakenly think that they are twin sisters, one is more mature. Now, do you think the subject of your cousin's photo that day was Lu Yuang or An Nuan? Su Mei raised her lips slightly. Although she was not completely sure, she felt that she had guessed some truths, some of Lu Chang'an, Lu Yu. Neither Wang nor Anyuan wanted to mention it, and at the same time they had to work together to cover up the embarrassing things in the past. Zhongqing was stunned for a moment and said with some uncertainty, the subject of Bai Hui's photo should be An Nuan. They are old classmates and have been tit for tat for 3 years. If it is Lu Yuang pretending to be An Nuan, she should feel something is wrong. Professor Lu, no matter how well maintained it is, there is still a significant difference between it and an 18 or 19-year-old girl. I suspect it's very possible that when your cousin took photos of An Nuan there, Lu Yuang was there, but she didn't come out to meet Bai Hui. Su Mei tapped An Nuan's photo with her fingers. Leave nail marks on it? Zhongqing looked at Su Mei with some confusion. Fortunately, he did not hear any dissatisfaction with Bai Hui from Su Mei's tone and meaning. Zhongqing did not expect that Bai Hui would be involved in this matter. It seemed that Su Mei still found out something. Key figures with some important clues. Many people can obtain huge wealth, maybe not because of hard work, maybe not because of advanced technology, but because there is an information gap between them and the market public. We know Lu Yuang is there, but Bai Hui doesn't. This is the information gap. Poor information value is very important and can often guide the truth and key clues. Su Mei frowned. Why do you think there is such an information gap? Third, madam, do you think that when Bai Hui went to take pictures, Lu Yuang did not leave by chance, but avoided Bai Fei? There is a big problem here. Zhongqing understood and couldn't help but become curious. Yes, didn't you just say that Bai Hui clearly remembered that she came to take pictures of An Nuan, but Lu Chang'an still went to buy a camera? If An Nuan simply wanted to take a photo, Bai Hui could help her take the photo. Why did Lu Chang'an buy a camera that day? Because Professor Lu, who was hiding, didn't take any pictures. Zhongqing vaguely understood the problem. Yes. I suspect that it was after Professor Lu issued the invitation to take photos that day that he discovered that the people who came to take photos were actually acquaintances, and Professor Liu's appearance was not suitable for being seen by acquaintances, so only An Nuan came to take photos. A woman like Professor Lu, literary and boring, naturally leaving regrets and dissatisfaction, so Lu Chang'an went to buy a camera. Su Mei smiled slightly. Her guess may be slightly different in details, but the overall context should be fine. Why is Professor Liu's appearance not suitable for being seen by acquaintances? Zhongqing looked at the highly similar photos of Lu Yuang and An Nuan returned by the technical baker. Su Mei stared at her chin with her fingers, tilted her neck back slightly, and stared at the photo with Zhongqing with a calm and distant gaze. Disfigured? Impossible. When disfigured, a woman is not in the mood to take pictures. Su Mei waved her fingers. The same goes for aging and becoming ugly. Only when you suddenly become beautiful or young do you want to take some photos as a souvenir. Zhongqing nodded. As a woman, of course she understands this feeling. Most women will take out their mobile phones to take a few selfies when they are dressing up or feeling suddenly radiant. It's just becoming more beautiful. There's no need to avoid Bai Fen. Then all that's left is to become younger, eliminating all possibilities. No matter how absurd the remaining answer is, it is also the correct answer. Su Mei looked at Zhongqing, she knowing that Zhongqing can know the truth without having to mention it anymore. If it's just to look young, there's no need to avoid Bai Fen. You mean, Professor Lu was probably so young at that time, so young that he was exactly the same as An Nuan. Zhongqing covered his mouth in disbelief. Taking photos that after simple processing, Professor Lu looked very similar to An Nuan. Su Mei clapped her hands and clapped, her soft palms undulating like water waves. She was not praising Zhongqing for his quick reaction, she was just sighing. Long Ben is so sentimental. You just said that you were drunk last year and Lu Chang'an sent you back to the hotel. That day I revealed the truth about the world to you. Today I will tell you some details, that is, as long as a woman has a relationship with Lu Chang'an, she can beautify her face and even regain her beauty. It is possible to regain youth. Sumei has invested heavily in anti-aging research projects over the years, but the results obtained, regardless of the cost, cannot be compared to the results achieved by Lu Chang'an's personal teaching. Lu Chang'an, it's impossible for him, it's impossible. Zhongqing felt like his head was buzzing. If he was hit hard, he would rather disobey human ethics and attack Professor Lu than throw his arms around him. Qing hugged her and pushed her along, but he also wanted to give her a slap in the face. Sumei seemed to be thinking about these things too, looking down from top to bottom, looking at Zhongqing's almost flawless figure. Zhongqing pulled up her clothes and skirt in embarrassment. She was once again not so confident in her feminine charm. Have you reached the age of sagging? Sumei knew his taste very well. It stands to reason that all aspects of Zhongqing's qualities are based on his aesthetic point. Especially Zhongqing has very perfect little feet, which are almost as good as Sumei's. It's on the same level of beauty, so he's not tempted? No, Zhongqing hurriedly denied that the impact of a woman sagging was no less than a man's discovery that he wet his shoes. Sumei waved and asked Zhongqing to come over. Zhongqing squatted down a little aggrievedly, pressed his elbows on Sumei's plump legs, rested his cheek on his arms, and said a little unacceptable, "Madam, is this really like this? I think it's just a guess, and there may be a misunderstanding. The guesses can't all be correct, but the main development process of the matter may be close to 10. I think there is probably some kind of misunderstanding between Lu Chang'an and Lu Yuang. Lu Chang'an mistook Lu Yuang for An Nuan. After An Nuan found out, she had no choice but to help cover it up." Sumei stroked Zhongqing's soft hair and analyzed it calmly. If this is the case, Zhongqing is not so uncomfortable, and is still a little worried. Will there be some kind of mistake in the future, that is, Lu Chang'an mistook Zhongqing for Bai Fan? That's not possible. Didn't you also find that Lu Yuang came to check out a room alone twice later? Maybe those 2 times were when Lu Chang'an stayed at her house and An Nuan spent the night. Lu Yuang wanted to avoid another mistake, or maybe in order to avoid being unable to resist the temptation, just run out and get a room. Otherwise her family lives in the Orange Garden community across the river, so why would she come to the hotel to get a room in the middle of the night? Sumei chuckled. Many women also have the experience of getting tired of staying at home, looking for some excuse to pursue a sense of ritual, and come to a hotel for a day. But they usually come in the afternoon, swim, work out, go to the spa, and reserve an exquisite dinner at the restaurant. Go to the hotel's Skyline bar in the evening to look for an affair, instead of running over there in the middle of the night like Lu Yuang and finishing it off. The doubts were all solved. Zhongqing rested his head on Sumei's thigh, thinking that he could actually ask Lu Chang'an about this matter. Given his temperament, he would not be angry or care about her. Oh, I understand. In fact, this is the task assigned to me by the third wife. She said so much, and she was talking about speculations, but she still wanted a confirmation. Dong Dong and Dandan should have been freeing up for a day today, and they probably haven't eaten anything good. I haven't treated them to supper for a long time. I'll call Lu Chang'an. Zhongqing understood what Sumei meant and went arranged. Sumei looked at Zhongqing's graceful back and nodded with a smile. The maid preparing for the marriage must be so considerate, so that she can help push the waist and other things in the future, instead of trying to compete with the young lady for favor. As soon as Zhongqing walked away, the lamb jumped up, twisted randomly, and ran up with its limbs. Sumei frowned. The little sheep was still wearing a set of black armor. "Mom, look at my new battle armor. Now I am Nightmare Jean Baa." The little sheep raised his head majestically. With this armor, Nightmare Jean Baa is not afraid even if he is whipped. What is the Nightmare War armor? Sumei looked at it carefully. The material of this armor was top-notch precision materials in a certain laboratory. After she made 2 sets of armors, there was not much material left. The subsequent reconstruction plan was actually used by Zhu Huntang to create this thing? The little fairy sheep wearing the nightmare armor is the Nightmare Zanba. I also made a suit for Dad. From now on, we will both wear the nightmare armor to play together and conquer the world, the little sheep said on Sumei's body. He walked up and down in front of her, showing her his mighty and domineering armor. When will the wool on your body grow? Sumei was not interested in the nightmare armor at all. At the same time, she was very grateful that Xiao Yang didn't include one set for her when ordering the nightmare armor. She reached out and touched the sheep's head. I heard from Zhongqing that the wool on your body was originally very soft and shiny, and it was the best wool. What's wrong? Do the evil capitalists want to harvest the wool of my labor again? I am indeed an exploiting class who breaks my bones and strips my flesh for barbecue. The wool has only grown back a little, and you are thinking about it again. The little sheep spread its limbs vigilantly, as if ready to headbutt the evil capitalist at any time. The little sheep had pulled sheep dung balls at Nanshan Ranch, so he was fully qualified to call himself a laborer, even though he was forced to do so by Lu Chang'an on a small trailer. Hearing it start talking nonsense again, Sumei didn't want to pay attention as usual. She took a sip of tea with one hand and put the other hand casually on the big iron cage next to it. There is an iron cage here. The little sheep saw it and jumped in. Hey, it just suits me. Sumei quickly locked the door lock of the big iron cage. Bah!